Chapter 48:26. Throwing those treasures into his arms with all his hands and feet, the young man would rush out of the sky. But immediately, Zakinki did open his arms to stop his way. You can't let him go, otherwise the safety of the adults can't be guaranteed. The young man heard the words and closed his eyes in a hurry. You can rest assured that I haven't seen anything and nothing will be passed on. Di Qing also realized something, directly released the Yanli rope to hug him, and thrown it into the depths of this small hole. The young man, who fell heavily on the ground, like a frightened rabbit, spoke in a panic. My lords, Imwei Liujia is a good person. I am diligent in this big, lonely mountain. I haven't even fallen down once every Chinese New Year. God can clearly understand my sincerity. I am loyal to the second emperor. Wu. Too lazy to listen to his nonsense, Di Qing blocked his mouth again and used the force to transform the whip and slashed him to count the whip, only to be honest. Suddenly, it was silent for a few days, and Qing Qing placed the unconscious sword Wu Shuang on a flat ground before he began to investigate his condition. Under this view, even Qing Qing was a little surprised. Jian Wu Shuang's original fragmented body, and even the internal organs were almost empty of the fairy body. At this moment, it has been restored. The shocking wound is also visible to the naked eye. The speed is repairing. Moreover, his breath has gradually stabilized from the previous fluctuations, and a complete recovery is only a matter of time. What a freak, this guy! Di Qing murmured in disbelief. The cleaning pond also came forward at this time, and his eyes were still slightly reddish, adult situation. He's fine, and it doesn't matter for a while. Di said coldly. He was obviously more disgusted with this almost culprit woman. Then can I take care of adults? She whispered. No, Di Qing responded coldly. He doesn't have to take care of him. He will recover soon. The cleaning pool is promised, and the lost return. As time went by, the cave in the fairy mountain fell silent within a day. I don't know how long it passed. A slight cry, a little excitement sounded from far and near outside the cave. Suddenly, a figure with more than enough size suddenly ran into the sky, and the snow-white hair was dotted with incomprehensible dark, dense lines. It was a dream taper in Shiqing Pond, and it was also the culprit that awakened all the fairy bones in the fairy tombs of the northern heaven. At the moment, he jumped into the sky, and his 4 dark eyes directly saw its owner, and he was thrilled when he was excited. But it was a powerful foot in response to it. Almost 10% of the effort was used to clean the pool and kick it out with 1 foot. At the same time, while Zhao Ting hadn't responded, he directly withdrew the saber from her waist and cut it towards Meng Tappy. But in the end, the long knife that circulated Yanli did not fall, but hovered over Meng Tapio's head. Shiqing Kai's eyes turned red, watching it coldly. Get out! I will no longer be your master from now on. Meng Tap whispered in a low voice, and her front paws swayed unsteadily on the ground. It didn't understand why his master suddenly became so cold. It whimpered and went forward on its lower body. Only this time, it was a sharp, long knife that responded to it. Cut it with a knife, and tore a wound directly on Meng Tap's neck. Go, Shi Qingqi said coldly, his long knife pointing out of the sky. Meng Tappy whimpered, lying motionless. At this time, a tired voice slowly sounded. Forget it, the things that have passed are gone, and the wisdom of a small animal is not yet civilized, and it is also reasonable. Jian Wushuang sat up slowly and coughed again. Sir, you're awake. Shi Qingqi was surprised, and his long knife stood on the ground, and he was a little embarrassed. It's not good to sleep again. He shook his head, helplessly. I Ching, who had been sitting next to him, gave him a careful look, then raised his eyebrows slightly. It's still pretty good. Jian Wushuang smiled. Fortunately, I didn't hurt the source, and the recovery was smooth. After he finished speaking, he looked around slowly. Are we here now? I Ching replied, among the vastness of the hinterland, the northern heaven has already left. It seems to be quite smooth. This small hole is pretty good. Although the strength is thinner, it is also a good go-to dojo. Jian Wushuang looked around and nodded. This small cave has hidden winds and condensed water in the day, and although the layout is a bit cold, it is still elegant, and its owner is obviously stylish. As he was about to take his gaze back, Yu Guang suddenly glanced at the corner of the wall, and there was a figure almost with zongzi, and the dumplings stared at them, looking at them in horror. This is... Jian Wushuang was puzzled. When Qingwen heard the words, he held out his hand, and the figure wrapped in dumplings rolled over, and at the same time removed the Yanlian chain from his mouth. Seeing this, the sullen young man hurriedly closed his eyes and said something in his mouth. I didn't see anything, and I didn't know how many people were there. I beg your adults to put it down. Jian Wushuang couldn't help crying and laughing. Nothing, open my eyes and let me see. The young man heard the words and finally opened his eyes slowly. Are you the master of this hole? He asked. The young man nodded. A Khonshu. Kam's voice trembled a little. Below is the second mountain owner of this big, lonely mountain, Wei Liujia. Wei Liujia? Good name. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile and said, how many mountain owners like you are in this vast sky? This rogue young man, named Wei Liujia like the pour of beans, spoke of the old bottom. There are dozens of heavens in the entire Damian heaven, but there are only 17 caves like Xianshan Cave like me, and only there are 17 mountain owners, and the mountain owners are hereditary. They cannot be led by others. Jian Wushuang touched his chin. 17 caves and 17 mountain owners. It seems that your identity is relatively high in this vast sky, right? Wei Liujia heard the words and flashed a look of embarrassment. The identity of Lord Dong Tianshan is certainly high, but my father died at a young age and only left me the seat of this big Gushan mountain. Speaking of the Lord of the Cave of Heaven, in fact, the entire Degushan Cave is just a polished pole for me, plus every Chinese New Year is to be worshipped, and my father has never left a little treasure. Below, I became the bottom of the 17 caves, not to be seen by any monks. Chapter 48:27. There was an awkward atmosphere in the cave of Daga Mountain. Jian Wushuang once again looked at this simple cave. Except for a few dilapidated futons that were almost patched, all other feng shui scenes were purely natural. Only then did he confirm that he was not lying, and it was really poor. No, are you as poor as a yen xian? Jian Wushuang made an unconscious attempt. Wei Liujia was very injured, and the expression on his face was almost embarrassed. That because I am just a little yen xian, and I have no great ability to gather money, I can only live by this big lonely mountain. Such a twist, plus the order of the emperor. The mountain owners should not leave their respective jurisdictions without authorization, so they are so poor. I used to ask other yen xian to ask for some treasures of precious treasures, and I plan to plant some seeds for the coming of the Chinese New Year. If you don't live, you can only grow some mortals, so after 1 or 2 visits, it becomes the situation you see. Speaking of this, Wei Liujia raised his head and looked at Jian Wushuang nervously. Several adults. You all also see that Wei Mao is really poor. Even if he bears his clothes, he can't squeeze a little treasure. And he also invites the adults to open the net. Jian Wushuang was also understandable at this time. The young yen xian named Wei Liujia now inherited his father's title and got the title of the mountain owner. But because of his bad luck and various other reasons, he finally fell into such a bad position that he couldn't even recruit talents and could only become a polished rod in his own territory. You can rest assured that I will never covet your anything, but just borrow the treasure land for a little rest, and then leave." Jian Wushuang finished, motioned to let Qing Qing loosen the rope of strength on him. After the rope was untied, the things that were originally hidden in Wei Liujia's arms were scattered all over the place. Looking closely, they are all treasures of various sizes, with dozens of pieces with various starbursts flashing, which is barely acceptable. The air froze, Wei Liujia's mouth twitched, and cold sweat poured from his temples. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. "Hurry up, he'll just wait for a little rest here, and it's not a robber who robs people of treasure." Wei Liujia echoed again, and hurriedly put those treasures back into his arms. After he packed up the treasures, Jian Wushuang reminisced on the previous conversation, and soon realized what was happening, and he asked, "What did you say? You have to go to the confession every Chinese New Year." "That is the confession, but is the second emperor the sun correct?" Wei Liujia nodded his head. Jian Wushuang's and Suza's formlessly shortened the distance between them, plus the almost prepare came to Daegu Mountain to visit, so that he had no one to tell, so he opened the conversation box unconsciously. "Yes, I have to go to Tiangong to make confession every Chinese New Year." Jian Wushuang heard his heart and moved his heart. After glancing at I Ching, he asked again, "Did the confession of this year's Chinese year begin, or not?" "Not yet." Wei Liujia shook his head. Every Chinese New Year's confession was started after the second emperor attended the heavenly feast. Somehow this year's Korean confession was delayed somehow, but it will start in another 3 years. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up, which was simply dozing off, and immediately put on the pillow. Originally, he was still having a headache, how to approach the young man to correct it. Now, the problem was solved immediately. As the saying goes, the thin camel is bigger than the horse. Even though Wei Liujia was crowded out by the rest of the mountain owners, he was also able to go straight to the Tiangong Palace and meet the master. Only this one is what Jian Wushuang urgently needs. If you go to Tiangong with him to get close to Gongzizing, you will have a fairly well-known and undetectable identity. As long as that Yinling is beside Gongzizing or nearby, she will surely be able to find her whereabouts. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang said, "If we want to go to the Tiangong with you and see the young man to correct it, can we?" Wei Liujia was stunned, and soon turned his face. "I'm afraid it's not very good. The Tiangong is heavily guarded. Everyone who goes to the tribute will be thoroughly investigated, in case." He didn't say the second half of the sentence, but Jian Wushuang knew what he was thinking. If you take them to the Tiangong, if there are any consequences and problems, they will definitely not be able to bear him. As Jian Wushuang prepared to continue to persuade him, Zhao Ting, who had not spoken in the distance, slowly walked forward. Wei Liujia looked up subconsciously, and suddenly he shuddered and stood up straight to salute Zhao Ting. Wei Liujia, the lord of the lonely Daegu Mountain, saw and met Zhao Tianguan. "Do you recognize me?" Zhao Ting came to him and asked quietly, "When, of course, you are the Tianguan next to the second emperor, and the low office must be kept in mind." Wei Liujia said aloud. Zhao Ting nodded and said, "I also recognize you, and I am most impressed, and I can still remember it now." His eyes lit up. Chengmeng Zhao Tianguan remembered the humble office. "Of course, remember, you are the most unique of the 17 mountain owners." Zhao Ting smiled slightly. "Aha, is that?" Wei Liujia looked embarrassed and naturally understood the meaning of Zhao Ting's words. Every time during this Chinese New Year, the confession made him look so different every time that he would not come to Taiwan. Of course, it would be impressive. If there is no accident, this time the Tiangong dynasty confession will make his appearance. Zhao Ting naturally didn't know what he was thinking, and then said, "They are all my colleagues. Because I have something important to do, I can't go to Tiangong recently. Can you take them to Tiangong to make confessions? Although Zhao Ting is asking, his tone is not to be discussed, although her words were full of loopholes, calm. But Wei Liujia did not dare to disobey her and had to resign, go back to Zhao Tianguan, the master of Daegu Mountain Wei Jiaken. Zhao Ting nodded, then looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang returned her positive look, then stood up and walked to Wei Liujia. Brother Wei, let's go to the confession. Can you prepare any gifts for the second emperor? Wei Liujia heard the words, suddenly sweating again, and his face was very embarrassed. Precise, the preparation is ready, but whether it can satisfy the second emperor is another. Can that make me take a look? Jian Wushuang smiled. Okay. He had a complex look and slowly stretched his hands into his arms. After a while, some of the treasures he hid in his arms were picked out one after another, hovering carefully in the air. After seeing these treasures prepared for the second emperor, Jian Wushuang finally believed Wei Liujia really poor. Chapter 48:28. Those that can be found even by ordinary top-level cultivation, and disdain for the practice of Tao. There are as many as 4 copies and occupy 40% of these treasures. There are 13 treasures in his collection, each of which can only be said to be terrible. Apart from the Taoist book, there are some treasures that cannot be named. However, Wei Liujia is still a family of treasures, and he introduced them to Jian Wushuang. One by one, this is Yushu Liuli Zun Luangjinyu Ring. 13 treasures that can be seen slightly, but only that one Yushu Liuli Zun is of some value, can warm the meridians, and has a better use for restoring the strength. But Rao is so. I am afraid that the effect of Yushu Liuli Zun is not as good as a black mountaintop crystal. Wei Liujia wiped the virtual sweat on his head. These are all the babies I bought from the real sword that my father left me. I hope the confession will not be ugly this time. Jian Wushuang already had no idea what to say. If these things, which were barely treasured, were brought to the Tiangong Palace and in front of the 2 emperors, then the mockery and humiliation of Wei Liujia would be inevitable. Thinking of this, he looked at Wei Liujia, and when he turned his palm, a small wooden box appeared and handed it over. You and I are destined. I will give you some gadgets today. Despite Wei Liujia's doubts, he still reached out and took the small Shimu box he had delivered. At the next moment, he gently opened the box body, and thousands of soft white ons escaped from the box, with a strong and extremely medicinal fragrance, illuminating the entire small cave for a moment. Gutter! A clear swallowing sound rang through everyone's ears. Wei Liujia's eyes were straight, and he looked straight at the pill in the small box of Shimu in his hand. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly, and his reaction seemed to have been expected. This kind of pill was taken by the 3 people of spring and autumn from the heaven of the 6 Crow Emperors. It was collected by the emperor and belongs to the top treasure. Even the ordinary Dayan, immortal, may not be able to take a look. Each one is a world of luck. Right now, this Emperor Zongdan pill has a magical effect on solid foundations and perception of immortality. Even Jian Wushuang is particularly fond of this immortality. In the end, Wei Liujia reluctantly withdrew his gaze, then closed the box and shook his head. The value of this kind of pill is too expensive. I am afraid I can sell all of my Daegu Mountain, and I can never buy it. I can't close. Jian Wushuang, Wenyan, smiled slightly. Accept it. Don't you want to use this pill to make a good face when you go to the Tiangong this year? His sentence directly poked the deepest pain in Wei Liujia's heart, reminding him of all the humiliations since taking over as the mountain owner. For a time, the palm of his hand stretched out, and he held the box tightly again, and his joints were pale. Miss you, just think about it. Take the opportunity to grasp it. Jian Wushuang smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Then we will go to Tiangong 3 years later. For 3 years, for Yanxian, it was just a snap. Within these 3 years, Jian Wushuang, Di Qing, and others did not leave the small cave in the big, lonely mountain in one step. They were all rearing and adjusting their strength to the peak. There is only one Yanxian who has not closed his eyes for a moment in 3 years. That Yanxian is Wei Liujia. For 3 years, I kept the box gifted to him by Jian Wushuang and was even careful to open it. I was afraid that it would suffer some kind of loss. Looking at Wei Liujia, who was almost going crazy, Jian Wushuang could not see it and gave him 4 Dizong Dan Maru with the same grade but different utility. Therefore, Wei Liujia almost passed out with excitement, and the first thing after he was awake was to bow his head, but was stopped by Jian Wushuang. After a simple entrustment, he restrained his leaping fairy source. 3 years have passed, and a distinctive morning bell and drum sound resounded from the sky corner. In the small cave of Daga Mountain, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. "Sir, we should start our journey." Wei Liujia seemed to have been waiting for a long time, and his uncontrollable joy appeared on his face. Jian Wushuang nodded, then stood up, and Di Qing followed him step by step. The candidates for this trip to Tiangong to meet Gongzi Jiao have already been determined. Only Jian Wushuang and Tai Qing and Wei Liujia are the 3. As for Jian Ting's decision, Zhao Ting didn't let her follow her, but stayed with Shiqing Pond in the cave of Daga Mountain. This decision is made on the one hand because more people are more likely to be exposed in the celestial palace corrected by the sun, on the other hand because Jian Wushuang does not believe her. How can it be a simple Yanxian if he can correct the position of Tianzi and be sent to assassinate him? "Adult, can Qingqi go with you?" Qingqi said nervously, rubbing his clothes corner nervously. Jian Wushuang glanced back at her. "Relax, I will come back to pick you up and take you home after I finish my work." At this point, the 3 bodies left the sky and turned into 3 streamers and flew away, while rising directly into the clouds. Jian Wushuang also noticed that at the same time there was a strong breath from all the heavens, and he flew towards the same place. That was the most central part of the entire Damien, and it was the Palace of the Sun. As a mountain host different from Tianyu, its status is quite high in Domitian. Each mountain host is the lowest in Yanxian realm, which is equivalent to the final card of the sun. In other words, even if Wei Liujia became poor again, he would have a thin face in front of his son. 17 fairy mountains, 17 mountain owners, are the closest to the temple of heaven, except the Lord of the blessed land. There are 17 lords of the mountain, and there are only 6 lords of the blessed land. Their status is more detached. It is a title that can only be obtained by Yanxian, who has made a great contribution to the prince. It is also hereditary. Within half a day, Jian Wushuang and others came to the heavenly palace at the center of Damientian. On the occasion of the vastness of the clouds, an imposing heavenly gate sits amidst the clouds and stands majestic. At this moment, there are no fewer than hundreds of figures like the sun and stars falling outside the heavenly palace. Surrounded by their respective subordinates, dozens of palatial physiques marched forward. As soon as Wei Liujia saw them, he was unconsciously short and wanted to avoid them. But the more he hid, the more he was discovered. Among the more than 10 Daohua noble figures, the middle-aged Yanxian, the richest man, could see Wei Liujia at a glance. It turned out to be Wei Xindi. It didn't happen in 1 year. It seems that there was some chance. The rich state Yanxian dragged his tone and walked over with a character. Despite the possession of the Emperor Zongdan pills given to him by Jian Wushuang, Wei Liujia still consciously dwarves and looks reddish. Chapter 48:29. That rich state Yanxian is obviously also one of the owners of the 17 mountains. A pair of small eyes shining with fine light kept looking at his clothes, and he said the previous words. The clothing worn by Wei Liujia at the moment was also given to him by Jian Wushuang. This pair of lacy, mountain-studded long dresses was given to Jian Wushuang by the young emperor and emperor. Each silk thread cost countless embroidered empresses and was also a rare treasure. He was handed over to Wei Liujia. Fu State Yanxian also saw the extraordinary clothes on his body, his eyes dripping. Wei Xindi, why are the real swords that you often wear around you missing? Wouldn't it be for the sake of buying this outfit and sell it? As his voice fell, more than a dozen other Dao Gui figures laughed, and were very lively. Wei Liujia's complexion turned red, and he had to rush forward to theory. But Jian Wushuang beside him pulled him, and his voice was imperceptible. A nun barking at the dog? Boy, what are you saying? Jian Wushuang's voice was not deliberately hidden, and it naturally passed into his ears, making Fu Yan Yanxian's face change. Wei Liujia was inexplicably reassured, and his state of mind also changed unconsciously. Facing the rich state, Yanxian who rushed over, he went up without fear. Wei Liujia, get away from this seat. I'm going to destroy the kid's origin. Fu State, Yanxian said angrily. Wei Liujia heard the words and slowly raised the corner of his mouth. Ding Chunshan, has Lao Tzu always been too kind, so that you have been riding on Lao Tzu's head and shit? Don't forget that Lao Tzu is also a mountain owner. Rich state, Yanxian froze down, looking at Wei Liujia, who could not believe it changed the aura. There was a moment of silence outside the Tiangong. A good mountain owner, said Fu Yanyan, who responded with a sneer. How dare you have done a great contribution for you, the mountain owner, for the entire Dimitri. I'm afraid I can't even afford the confession from the DPRK's position. Do you care how much I have contributed? Even if Lousy lay down and sleeps every day, that is the mountain owner. Wei Liujia also sneered. How do I take off my shoes and rub my legs? As long as you can press me, let alone rub your legs for your slippers, even if you lick the soles of this seat. Fu State, Yanxian coldly said, if you are not good for me, then please remove the mountain automatically. How about the position of the Lord and running 3 circles around the Tiangong with bare ass? Lao should answer. Glancing at him, Wei Liujia turned and strode into the heavenly palace. After eating a boring loss, Fuxian Yanxian, who knew that his face was lost, wanted to take him away. Wei Liujia, wait for this seat. In the vast cloud ladder, Wei Liujia's face flushed with excitement. His mother! I have never been as happy as I am today. The birdiness I have experienced before, I have returned it together today. It turned out to be so happy. After he finished speaking, looking at Jian Wushuang sincerely, today I was able to raise my eyebrows and exhale completely, but also thanks to the blessing of the adult. Weimo thanked me here. Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. In fact, even without the details I gave you, you can still raise your eyebrows. You have always been stuck in your own opinion, but you never know how to deal with that kind of person is to return it ruthlessly. It is far less than the spirit, and the spirit to crush him materially. Jian Wushuang said this calmly, and then stopped talking. And Wei Liujia was also pondering the meaning of his words, and awed him for a while. The ladder of 9,990, until the last step, the magnificent gate of the heavenly palace appeared. The magnificent celestial palace in which the sun is located is full of majestic feelings. Compared with the heavenly palace in the northern celestial state of the late emperor's son, it is a little less tricky and ingenious. It was a bit majestic. This gave Jian Wushuang a bit of an illusion, and the correction of the sun was the real little emperor. The confession that is opened every other Chinese New Year is a law rectified by the sun after the Feast of the Heaven, which is intended to secure the mountain owner and the lord of the blessed land in order to prevent a second heart. The gate of the Tiangong Palace has long been opened, and a scent of incense floats out of the temple, calming the hearers. Guarded guards walked out of the hall and led them in sequence. In order to highlight the facade and style, every mountain owner who came to the Tiangong was followed by 5 or 6 top repair subordinates. Each of them was surrounded by a huge box, which was obviously a gift for the confession. Especially the wealthy Yenxian who confronted Wei Liujia outside the Tiangong Palace, followed by 8 top repaired subordinates, and the number of boxes in his arms was roughly 20 pieces. Instead, Wei Liujia was very bachelor, holding a slap-sized Yushu Liulizun seated. This scene was taken into account by Fu Yenxian, and he almost laughed out loud. He, who read countless treasures, naturally could see the Yushu Liulizun in Wei Liujia's hand at a glance, and even his body was not as good as the one he wore. I'm going to see how you compete with this seat. Just wait for 3 rounds of Rao Tiangong with bare ass. Fu state, Yenxian glared at him fiercely, and then took a seat. As long as these mountain masters entered the temple, Jian Wushuang realized that he was seated in the lower position of the throne, and he had already settled 6 old men, all of whom were quite mature, and they should be the masters of the blessed land. Sitting next to Wei Liujia, Jian Wushuang's eyes were always watching the empty throne. He was expecting that the figure with the bone-shaped armor disappearing would appear in the next time. Master, are you waiting for the emergence of the second emperor? Seeing the fluctuations in Jian Wushuang's eyes, Wei Liujia lowered his voice. After the morning bell strikes 3 times, the second emperor will move from Sendai to Tiangong. Jian Wushuang nodded, waited intently. When it seemed as though the bells ringing from afar, the entire Tiangong was suddenly silent, and all the mountain owners were sitting in danger, even the lords of the blessed land that closed their eyes and kept their eyes open. There are fairy cranes chirping outside the hall, while thousands of fairy clouds rise. Under the guidance of hundreds of cranes, a negative hand stood, dressed in a suit of the emperor, slowly walking into the heavenly palace. At this moment, the lord of the 17 mountains, the lord of the 6 blessed lands, and a large number of Yenxian have been repaired, and they are all screaming, "The courtiers meet the 2 emperors." Jian Wushuang looked up at his back. Compared with the previous feast in the heavenly court, the sun had a little more calmness that did not show the mountains and dew, as if everything was clear to the chest, giving people a sense of self-effacing. A feeling of, this is a very strong opponent. You can never guess his thoughts. Jian Wushuang doesn't even think that it was the real strength of the young master in the battle for the peach. Chapter 48:30, Wei Liujia's court tribute. The entire cave of Daga Mountain was filled with an awkward atmosphere. Jian Wushuang looked at the extremely simple heavenly abode again. Except for a few tattered futon that were almost patched up, all the other feng shui and scenery were pure natural. Only then did he confirm that he was not lying, and that it was really poor. It can't be. You are a Yen immortal, and you are this poor. Jian Wushuang unconsciously added another blow. Wei Liujia was very hurt, and the expression on his face was almost embarrassed. Well, because I'm just a little Yen, immortal, and don't have much ability to accumulate wealth, I can only live on this Daga mountain, which is why my life is so difficult. In addition, the prince has ordered that the mountain lords are not allowed to leave their respective areas of jurisdiction without permission, which is why they are so poor. I had previously asked for some precious spiritual treasure seeds from other Yen immortals. I was prepared to plant some, and when the Hua year was coming, I would bring the harvest to the court as tribute. However, my Daga mountain is a land of evil. Nothing can grow here. Only some ordinary things can grow here. Thus, after a few times, It became the situation you see now. At this point, Wei Liujia raised his head and looked at Jian Wushuang nervously. My lords, you can see that I'm really poor. Even if I strip off my clothes, I won't be able to squeeze out any treasure. Please show mercy. Jian Wushuang finally understood that the young Yan immortal named Wei Liujia had inherited his father's position and received the title of Mountain Lord. However, due to his bad luck and various other reasons, he was so down and out that he could not even recruit talents. He could only stay in his own territory. Don't worry, we won't covet anything of yours. We'll only be borrowing this treasured land for a short rest before leaving. After Jian Wushuang finished speaking, he motioned Di Qing to release the rope on his body. When the rope was untied, the things that Wei Liujia had hidden in his arms were scattered all over the ground. Upon closer inspection, they were all treasures of various sizes. There were dozens of them, and they were shimmering with all sorts of treasure lights. They could barely be considered decent. The air froze. The corners of Wei Liujia's mouth twitched, and cold sweat seeped out of his temples. Jian Wushuang smiled and said, "Put it away quickly. We're just taking a short break here. We're not bandits who want to steal someone's treasure." "Yes, my lord," Wei Liujia responded and hurriedly stuffed the treasures back into his arms. While he was putting away the treasures, Jian Wushuang thought back to the previous conversation and quickly realized something. He asked, "You just said that you have to go to the court every year. You go to the court to see the second emperor, Prince Jiu?" Wei Liujia nodded. Jian Wushuang's warmth had unknowingly closed the distance between them. In addition, there were almost no top cultivators who came to visit Daga Mountain on normal days, so he had no one to talk to. Thus, he unconsciously opened his mouth and said, "Yes, I have to go to the Heavenly Palace to offer an official tribute every 1 year." Jian Wushuang was moved by his words. After exchanging a glance with Di Qing, he asked again, "Then, has the offering ceremony for this year begun, or not?" "Not yet." Wei Liujia shook his head and said, "Every year's tribute starts after the second prince returns from the Heavenly Court's feast. For some reason, the current year's tribute has been delayed for some time, but it will start in 3 years. Jian Wushuang's eyes brightened. This was simply great timing. Originally, he was still having a headache over how to get close to Prince Jiu. Now, this problem was immediately solved. As the saying goes, a lean camel is still bigger than a horse. Even if Wei Liujia was ostracized by the other mountain lords, he was still able to go straight to the Heavenly Palace and meet Prince Jiu. This was what Jian Wushuang urgently needed. If he went to the Heavenly Palace with him to get close to Prince Jiu, he would have a rather legitimate and undetectable identity, as long as Yinling was by Prince Jiu's side or nearby. He would definitely be able to find her whereabouts. At the thought of this, Jian Wushuang said, "If we want to go to the Heavenly Palace with you and meet Prince Jiu, can we?" Wei Liujia was stunned, but his expression quickly changed. "I'm afraid that's not a good idea. The Heavenly Palace is heavily guarded, and every person who goes to pay tribute will be thoroughly investigated." What if he did not say the second half of his sentence, but Jian Wushuang knew what he was thinking? If he took them to the Heavenly Palace, the consequences and problems that would arise would definitely not be something that a little Yen immortal like him could bear. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to persuade him again, Zhao Ting, who had been silent all this while, slowly walked forward. Wei Liujia subconsciously raised his head to look, and his entire body trembled at the sight. He hurriedly stood up straight and cupped his hands in salute to Zhao Ting. "Your humble servant, Wei Liujia, the Mountain Lord of Daga Mountain, greets Heavenly Official Zhao. You recognize me?" Zhao Ting came in front of him and asked indifferently, "Oh, of course. You're the Heavenly Official serving the second prince." I'll definitely remember that, Wei Liujia said, embarrassed. Zhao Ting nodded and said, I also know you, and you're the one who left the deepest impression. I can still remember you even now. His eyes brightened. Thank you, heavenly official Zhao, for remembering my position. Of course I remember. You are the most unique individual among the 17 mountain lords, Zhao Ting said with a smile. Aha! Is that so? Wei Lujia's expression turned awkward, and he naturally understood what Zhao Ting meant. This once-in-year court tribute had made him embarrassed every time. So, of course, he would leave a deep impression. If there were no accidents, he would make a fool of himself again in the heavenly palace. Zhao Ting naturally did not know what he was thinking. She continued, They are all my colleagues. I have important matters to attend to, so I can't go to the heavenly palace. Can you take them to the heavenly palace to pay their respects? Although Zhao Ting was asking, her tone did not allow any room for discussion. Although her words were full of loopholes, Wei Liujia did not dare to disobey. He cupped his hands and said, replying to heavenly official Zhao, the mountain lord of the Daegu mountain, Wei Liujia will obey your orders. Zhao Ting nodded and then looked at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang gave her an affirmative look and then walked toward Wei Liujia. Brother Wei, did you prepare any gifts for the second prince? When Wei Liujia heard this, he immediately broke out in cold sweat again. His expression was extremely uneasy. Yes, I have prepared, but whether it will satisfy the second prince is another matter. Then can I have a look? Jian Wushuang smiled. All right. He had a complicated expression on his face as he slowly reached into his arms. A moment later, some of the treasures he had hidden in his arms were taken out one by one and carefully suspended in the air. When he saw the treasures that were prepared for the second prince, Jian Wushuang finally believed that Wei Liujia was really poor. Chapter 48:31. There are hundreds of eyes staring at Zhenwiang's celestial heavenly court. Judging by the performance of the sun, it is definitely not his last strength, including finally being suppressed by Jian Wushuang. He definitely has several ways to get out of trouble, but in the end, why it will be a defeated situation, Jian Wushuang guesses that the means of correction by the sun may not be displayed. After all, judging from the fairy style he released in that contest, it was very cloudy and fierce. Jian Wushuang put him in the ranks of dangerous people, and naturally would never start a conflict with him. The scene of the killing of the son of the goddess in the northern celestial state was absolutely impossible to be staged in Dami. The figure sits on the throne. The sun nodded slowly and looked across every Yenxian in the heavenly palace. On his side, accompanied by a white robe, Yenxian who was not angry. Zhu Qing are seated one by one. The sun waved his hand and smiled. We haven't seen it for a year, and we will meet for 3 years. Zhu Qing, please drink 300 cups. My son manages enough. At the end of the talk, laughter sounded in this palace, and the atmosphere was at its best. In the face of these immortal mountain masters and lords of the blessed land, Gong Zizing did not show his identity, but pulled his status down, giving people a sense of equalization. Even Jian Wushuang couldn't find any flaws in this conversation, and naturally there was no discomfort. Immediately afterwards, the sommelier boy presented a bottle of exquisite wine. Although it seemed to be a small bottle, it contained more than 1,000 pounds of liquor. After picking up the wine, Wei Liujia very naturally poured a cup for Jian Wushuang, and then the Qing, and finally poured himself a cup. He was a little shocked by the small details that could not be seen. Although Wei Liujia is unbearable, it is also the owner of Xianshan Mountain, and his character is the hard, smelly stone in the pit. At the same time he is poor, he is also a hard, smelly, stubborn donkey. And those two guys who can make him drink aren't his followers? Is it a rescue soldier who moved in, thinking of the abnormal way Liujia outside the previous Tiangong temple? Ding Chunshan suddenly lost his confidence. Is there really any treasure hidden in that guy's hands? Ding Chunshan murmured secretly, but quickly calmed down again. Even if there is any baby in Wei Liujia's hand, is there no baby in his hand? Not only there are, but also the quantity and quality far exceeding each previous confession. For this Chinese New Year confession, Ding Chunshan almost brought all his family's identity, only to make a good impression in front of the sun. The reason why all the people brought over were desperate. Ding Chunshan still had a hidden meaning that was not revealed. This year's Chinese New Year confession is later than the previous one. This is the first time. There is no precedent, and he is well informed that the 5 brothers of the sun's correction have some minor conditions, which leads to the state of martial law in each heaven. Therefore, Ding Chunshan boldly speculated that the 2 emperors and sons might be able to lower the luck of Fudi and fuse at this juncture to strengthen the stability of Domitian. 17 Xianshan, mountain lords, and 6 blessed land lords, plainly speaking, are the right-handed bodyguards of the sun. Only when the fortune of Fukuzawa's luck drops again will they have common benefits for them. Whether you can be promoted from the position of Xianshan Mountain Lord to the Lord of Blessed Land depends on this opportunity. So this time, Ding Chunshan must take the lead. He lifted his head and drained the wine from the glass. Then he looked around with pride in his eyes. Jian Wushuang, who was sitting on the side, frowned slightly, and the wine in the glass remained unchanged. The wine had gone through the 3rd tour, and Yinling still did not appear in the Tiangong, which made him unable to sit still and began to think about getting out, and took the opportunity to explore around the Tiangong. Just as he was thinking about how to get out, the atmosphere in this palace began to change subtly. All the followers behind the master of Xianshan Mountain began to sort out the boxes. Although the mountain masters were still drinking, they seemed to have been working hard in the dark. The most treasured treasures bred by the young son Jiao Aoyudiandi and the young man Moshi male color in this large division are almost known to Yan Xian, who is a little herd. This also gave birth to the scene of presenting treasures. Every master of Xianshan Mountain, and even the master of the Blessed Land, began to present their own treasures. The first to present treasure was a lord of the Blessed Land sitting at the head of the younger son. He got up and took out a black and white wishful wish from his arms. Your Highness, this thing is called to avoid the wishful thinking. It was cast by Su Tua, a 3-inch mountain master Su Tua, and contains 2 extremely rich first-day weather luck, which is a rare treasure. This thing has black and white 2-color bone buds. Just twist the black bone buds to avoid evil spirits and clean the spirit platform. If you press and hold the white bone buds, you can absorb most of the delirium and blood. The 2-color rui, which was first thrown by the elder lord of the Blessed Land, is still valuable. If this object is worn on the body, it can avoid some of the special immortals that practice the Phelan Dafa. The sun, sitting on the head, nodded his head and gestured, without showing any expression. After the elder lord of the Blessed Land will evade rui and give it to the boy, he will be seated again. Since then, the devotion of the treasures has begun. This is an invisible battle, without smoke. The endless stream of rare and precious treasures emerged first, and the quality was extremely high, and some treasures made Jian Wushuang all interested. As long as the immortal source does not die, it will instantly shape the dove-shaped immortal grass of the peak fairy body. There is a sacred gourd that easily kills Yan Xian and only needs a drop of essence blood. There is even a real sword made of sky-hanging wood with a strong life. Tianchuamu is a fairy tree that grows only when Emperor Qiyun blesses. Without Emperor Qiyun, it will wither and die, and it is an indispensable thing for the construction of heaven. a true sword made of tenchu, wood with a strong breath of life, and no signs of withering and death. This is unprecedented. It is no longer possible to measure the value of it with treasures. Such a real sword has become the most dazzling existence. Even the treasures of countless suns and corrections are extremely favored by this true sword. It is the 13th Fairy Mountain Lord who presented the true Sword of the Wood in this day. This time, he only brought such a treasure, but it has become a force to suppress the crowd. According to what he said, this day, the true wooden sword was discovered by him from an ancient battlefield that was left behind. It is very likely that it was a former emperor who cast it with supreme luck and gave it. Saber for the Delichun. Ding Chunshan, who was sitting at the same place, was also somewhat unsteady at this time. He could clearly feel that this offering is not comparable to the offerings in the past years, regardless of quality or quantity. Chapter 48:32. This time the quality of the treasure is too high. There is Dehexianxian grass in the front and Tyamumu's sword in the back. Ding Chunshan gritted his teeth and secretly said, "Let me see how many treasures you can have." However, in a half-day effort, dozens of treasures appeared like flowing water. When it was Ding Chunshan's turn, he proudly stood up and took a few steps, turning his palms between the two, and two slowly turning black beads appeared. His Royal Highness. This thing is called the Z bead, which is divided into thundercloud double beads. Lei Zhu has the power of casting, and Yun Zhu has the power of destruction. One casting is a small heaven, and one destruction is also a small heaven. When Ding Chunshan's Ding Tianzhu came out, all Xianshan mountain owners whispered. It is already amazing to be able to seal two extreme forces in tiny pearls, and the prestige is equally good. The youngest son who sat at the top of the head also rarely spoke. Not bad. Ding Chunshan heard the words, and he quickly bowed his hand with joy. His Highness can like it. It is a blessing for me, Ding Chunshan. The other Xianxian masters said that they all pointed their lips away, without traces. In terms of flattery, this product is definitely a good hand, and no one can control it. After handing the Ding Zi to the boy, Ding Chunshan only felt comfortable and looked at everyone a bit. Then it was Wei Liujia's turn to confess, and the atmosphere in the entire Tiangong suddenly became a little cheerful. There was also a smile in Gong Zizheng's eyes. He was also very impressed with Wei Liujia, the Lord of the Lonely Mountain. Every time the confessions wore a plain robe, they looked very poor. Treasures are naturally like spreading goods, not even treasures. However, the son did not care about these things. With his father Shang Yuan, Wei Liujia was still eligible to go to this heavenly palace and become a party of the Xianshan Mountain. After all, his father was once known as Wei Jun, the of war. Slowly spit out a breath, Wei Liujia and Jian Wushuang looked at each other, and then took the Yushu Lulizan forward. His Royal Highness, this is what Wei Liujia presented, named Yushu Liulizun, which has the function of nourishing meridians and restoring vitality. It is a treasure. As soon as this remark came out, the entire Tiangong laughed completely, and even the white-robed Yanxian, who was behind his son's corrections, disdain. The most fiercely smiling Ding Chunshan said arbitrarily, "It seems that this time it was His Second Highness who lost money. He hosted a banquet, but he ended up with a broken one. It seems that it is time to mention the qualifications of the Tiangong." The sword sitting on the side was unpleasant. If it were not in this heavenly palace, just by the noisy voice, he would like to unscrew Ding Chunshan's head. Young master corrected his face calmly and smiled slightly. "Okay, I have received your thoughts. Sit back," Wei Liujia promised, and solemnly handed over the Yushu, Liulizun, to lead the boy, and then walked out of his arms to find a slap-sized, exquisite, Hinoki small box. His Royal Highness, Wei Liujia, also has a pill. There was silence in the temple of heaven, and all the mountain owners stretched their necks and waited to see what else he could look like. Gongzi Jiao also came to interest, and he helped his chin open and see. Wei Liujia nodded, then reached out and gently opened the box. Immediately, thousands of strands of colorful huameng burst out, and the medicinal fragrance that was so thick that it could not be turned into a scroll was like a picture scroll, and it instantly covered the entire Tiangong. The original self-formed prince corrected, sitting straight for a moment, staring straight at the things in the box. All the mountain owners, together with the lord of the blessed land, straightened up involuntarily and wanted to see exactly what the pill was so that such a vision would burst out. Ding Chunshan's fat face was so nervous that he smelled something unusual. This pill, what's the role? The inquirer Shinsheng asked. Back to your highness. You can let Rian Dingxiu produce a fairy root. Just a few crosses, like a thunder, completely exploded in this heavenly palace. The effect is fierce, far more than 10 times the true sword cast by the wooden tree that day. Even the calm-minded younger man could not help but take a deep breath. Is this serious? Your Highness Mingjian, Wei Liujia said, and then handed over the Xiumu box containing Danmaru to lead the boy. The young man quickly ingested it into his hands and looked at the dark golden pill with a colorful rainbow in the box. He raised his head a moment later and solemnly said, Liujia, what reward do you want? There was a riot in the entire Tiangong Palace again, which was never seen in the confessions of the Chinese government in the past few years, and the Sun Jiaoku never said the word reward, but it is a precedent now. Wei Liujia then slowly shook his head. I don't want anything. It is to repay the debts of the previous years. The son opened his mouth, but he wanted to reward him, but he didn't know why. The appearance of this pill means that a Yenxian can be directly cultivated. A Yenxian is the strategic foundation. Equivalently, Wei Liujia sent him a Yenxian in disguise. The importance is self-evident. Ding Chunshan had a fat face, and he suppressed the uneasiness in his heart. He stood up and came to the side of Wei Liujia, arching his hand. His Royal Highness, the courtiers and treasures are to be presented. After that, he reached over again and gave a bronze bell. Your Highness, this thing is called a 9-turn dry bell. Each turn is a sound, a total of 9 turns. A turn is better than a turn, just a flick of a turn. There will be a breathtaking, calm power, even if it's impossible for Yenxian to escape. After he finished speaking, all Xianshan mountain lords nodded secretly. This 9-turn dry bell is indeed the best among the treasures. It is indeed terrifying to be able to persuade Yenxian, but it is still slightly inferior to the pill offered by Wei Liujia. It seems to be extremely resentful. Ding Chunshan looked at him with a sneer. His eyes seemed to signal that there are still many treasures in this seat that were not taken out. How do you compare it? However, Wei Liujia just glanced at him sideways. You read books. Okanshu. Kam reached into his arms, this time directly pulled out 2 small boxes of clover. The air fell into a suffocating atmosphere, and even the sun's corrections couldn't calm down. His Royal Highness, these 2 Zapindan pills are equivalent to the 1 of Fangkai, which can make the ordinary enter into Yending cultivation and give birth to fairy roots. The Tiangong was completely boiling, and all the mountain owners got up and looked at Wei Liujia's hands in disbelief. The horizontal flesh on Ding Chunshan's face trembled fiercely, and his figure unconsciously stepped back half a step. The son's palm pressed firmly on the throne has been quietly clenched, and his eyes shoot out the fine man's. Immediately, Wei Liujia looked at Ding Chunshan, who was stunned, and smiled lightly. Dingshan Lord may still have treasures to offer. I'm in a hurry. I can't wait to give away the remaining treasures. Show off wealth, show off naked. All the mountain owners, the lords of the blessed land, looked at him in disbelief. This great mountain lord, who has made a foreign appearance in the treasures of several years, will use his own strength to defeat 10. 6 mountain owners, 6 landowners. Chapter 48:33. 3 pills of pills, which can make the pills of Prussian cultivation produce the pill of Xianzhen, is beyond the scope of treasures, not to mention that these Xianshan mountain masters, even as the son of the emperor, have never seen such a mysterious pill. One is a crushed existence, but at present, Wei Liujia has given 3 in one face. Naturally, there is no mountain owner, and he can attack his front and frustrate his man. A total of 3 Zapindan pills were put into the hands of Gong Zizhio, which established Wei Liujia's unshakable position in one fell swoop. Wei Liujia smiled again. Master Ding Shan, but haven't the treasures ever been given? Ding Chunshan, who already knew the situation, had a fat white face, but he still gritted his teeth. I still have. Without saying a word, Wei Liujia took another box out of his arms. I will give another pill, which is the same as the 3 pill. The silence in the Tiangong Palace, with the face of Ding Chunshan as ash, for pieces of Zapindan pill. That is, the archer gave for Yanxian. How can he play with his mother? When can Yanxian be manufactured in batches? Yanxian is a great road, not a children's play. Owning a fairy route means that you have realized the road ahead. If you are in this way, the subsequent impact will be unpredictable. 4 Zapindan pills completely defeated Ding Chunshan or crushed it. The remaining 16 mountain owners and 6 lords of the blessed land consciously collected all the gifts they offered to avoid being disgraced. Looking at this scene, Jian Wushuang smiled slightly. The 5 pills in Wei Liujia's hands were all screened by him, and they were all quite satisfactory, but they did help ordinary cultivators to produce immortal roots. The fairy position can only be said to be a character. Ding Chunshan felt the insurmountable horror for the first time. All the belongings he prepared were completely useless, and he was completely defeated. This year's confession of the Chinese New Year made Wei Liujia, who was supposed to be a foreigner, all the limelight. Taking a deep breath, the son whispered slowly, Liujia, let's say what I want. Within my ability, everything can be given to you. Wei Liujia heard the words, smiled, and smiled extremely freely. His Royal Highness, Wei Liujia, really has something he wants. What? I want Ding Chunshan to take off my shoes and press my feet. This rather joke sentence made the son stunned for a moment with the mountain owners, but he soon understood the meaning. Wei Liujia was paying back his teeth and reporting the troubles he had suffered in previous years. Every time, Ding Chunshan was in trouble, so he improvised a sword dance, which was quite embarrassing. Right now, it is time to fight back. Ding Chunshan was unbelievable, and then looked to the young man for help. The young man corrected his cough and waved his hand. Wei Liujia promised, and then looked at Ding Chunshan with a smile. This is a complete shame. Once done, he will endure ridicule among all the mountain owners. But he had to do it, and the son's correction had been acquiesced. Ding Chunshan's face was ashamed, his lips squatted down, and just before his hands were about to touch the boots, Wei Liujia stepped back, stared at him deeply, and returned to the original place. I'm not going home yet. The son whispered and scolded Ding Chunshan back. During this Chinese New Year confession, a total of 4 Zapindan pills were harvested, and his mood was extremely good in an instant. Now, the forces among the various emperors have already formed. Even if the vast division is vast, he wants to recruit 4 out of thin air. Wei Yanxian is also a very difficult thing. As far as Gong Zizhio is concerned, these 4 pills have improved his strength. Thinking of this, he looked at the white robe Yanxian beside him. Bai Pao Yan Xianxin was enlightened, but immediately bent down and whispered, His Royal Highness, is it too sloppy? Not sloppy, let's announce it. The young man said lightly, "Bai Pao Yenxian promised," and then walked a few steps, facing all Yenxian in the Tiangong Palace, announced the sound. "This is chartered by His Royal Highness. Liujia, the owner of Daegu Mountain, made a great contribution to Domitian." He declared that Liujia was promoted to Zioxiangwan, and his seat Daegu Mountain was promoted to a blessed land, enjoying all the blessings and blessings of the Lord of the blessed land. It will take effect immediately. All the mountain owners and the Lord of the blessed land were shocked, and Liujia also almost fell off the seat. Degushan inexplicably became a blessed place, enjoying fuse luck, and he was promoted to Zioxiangwan. All this is just because of 4 Zapindan pills. Everything came so fast that Liujia felt like a dream. It was not until his knees that he returned to life that his mind gradually became clear. It was true to be a small heavenly official, and it was true to enjoy the luck of the Lord of Fudi. He looked back, and Jian Wushuang, who was still sitting there, smiled slightly at him. Liujia has never been stunned at this moment. If he hadn't watched so many Yenxian, he would have to go directly to Jian Wushuang. After the confession of the dynasty, the 17 Xianshan mountain lords became 16, and the 6 blessed land lords became 7. After the banquet, until the end, Jian Wushuang did not see Yinling's figure, which made him anxious. After the banquet for the DPRK was completely over, he no longer wanted to stay longer, and he directly took Diqing to explore around the Tiangong. "Sir, can we see you again?" Outside the Temple of Heaven, Liujia asked a little bit reluctantly among the clouds. Jian Wushuang turned around and said, "If you are destined, you will see you again. By the way, if you return to Daegu Mountain, take care of the 2 girls and don't let them walk around." Liujia nodded vigorously and solemnly arched his hand in front of his back. Everything seemed as if it were another world, but he knew that a brand new year was coming. After stepping out of Tiangong and saying goodbye to Jian Wushuang, Liujia prepared to return to Daegu Mountain first to see the luck of Fudi. But as he was about to leave Tiangong, several Yenxian dressed in white robes came after him. "Wei Qingguan, Your Highness would like to ask you to go back and narrate." Liujia jumped in his heart, but he didn't show anything on his face. After nodding, he returned to Tiangong. In the Hall of the Incense Curls, only Liujia was at the moment. Gongzi sits face to face with him, and there is no other Yenxian besides that. "Liujia, how many years has your father Wei Jun gone?" After pouring a cup of tea for him, the son asked with a smile. "Back to His Royal Highness. I can't remember clearly. I want to have it for decades." Liujia responded quietly. He nodded. "It's been almost that long. When I was a teenager, I was in front of the emperor in the heavenly court. I saw your father Wei Jun's heroic attitude. It was very photographic and worthy of being called the god of war." Liujia arched his hand. "I take Father Xie His Highness to appreciate." The son smiled and smiled. "I don't lack anything, but I just miss something, the of war like Wei Jun." Chapter 48:34. Liujia was sitting at the same place, and some did not understand what he meant. His father, Wei Jun, had already died in battle dozens of years ago, and Gongzi Jiao now talks about it. I am afraid that the words also contain other meanings. After a moment of contemplation, Liujia looked up at him again. "His Royal Highness, what does that mean?" Young Master Xiaowen smiled and reached out and patted him on the shoulder. "It doesn't mean anything. The of war Wei Jun is now unavailable, but if there is a substitute for him, I can't do without a competent Tianguan." "Well, you go back and prepare first, and come to Tiangong to be a great official." Liujia stunned and shook his head hurriedly. "His Royal Highness, this is really too hasty. I am absolutely incapable. Just like the Zhao Ting before the young sun corrects, it is the great celestial officer, the so-called great celestial official, except for the youngest sun correcting, can affect the entire great celestial, and has great power. The remarks at the moment were tantamount to thunder and burst into his mind. Gongzi Zhao smiled again, and then took a small box of shimu from his arms and placed it on the case between them. Liujia, this Sapindan pill, is very precious to me, and I need them very much. Wei Liujia looked at him and already knew the meaning of the words. Without hesitation, he took out the last box of pill from his arms a moment later. His Royal Highness, this is my last box of pills. Unlike the first 4 boxes, its effect is to help Yen Xian to perceive the fairy style and deepen it. In just one sentence, there have been some changes in the look of the youngster. To help Yen Xian to perceive and deepen the immortal style, this means to completely open up the path of Yang Xian's grandeur. This kind of effect can no longer be described by the sky. Even the fairy peach obtained in the heavenly realm can't be compared. Converging with the fine man's in his eyes, the sun looked at him and asked, Liujia, where did you find these pills? Going back to your highness, my father left. I found it in the cave of Daegu Mountain accidentally. Wei Liujia said without hesitation. There are only 5 remaining, all dedicated to his highness today. The young man stretched out his palm and took the last box of pill from his hand, closed the lid gently, then got up and turned his back to him. Don't lie to Liujia. These pills can't be left to you, by Wei Jun. I have followed him since I was a boy. I know him best. I have never had any act of hiding in my life. My emperor did not like Dan Maru, and naturally he would not give it to Wei Jun. This kind of Jipin Dan Wan only the emperor will have. Speaking of which, the sun slowly bent over. Tell me, where did you find these pills, or who gave it to you? Wei Liujia did not expect this scene, but he quickly calmed down and arched his hand. His Royal Highness indeed was left by his father. I said, it's impossible. Wei Jun can't leave these things. The sun chopped off the high-pitched cold voice. These pills must have been found by you from some place, or someone else gave it to you. His voice has softened a lot. Now, as long as you tell me, the position of Deity Angwin is yours, and I will give you whatever you want. Taking a deep breath, Wei Liujia said, His Royal Highness, the ministerial sentence is true, there is no treasure, and no one is handed over to the minister. Gongzi's complexion gradually became cold. Really? It's not that I didn't say it, but I have already told your highness. Wei Liujia said in a nervous voice, Do you know the consequences of hiding without reporting? At this moment, Gongzi's face was completely cold. As his voice fell, more than 10 figures appeared in the empty sky palace. Everybody is full of yen. All of them are Yen Xian. They came and slowly surrounded Wei Liujia. This is the last chance. The sun said softly with his back to him. Unbelievable eyes appeared in his eyes, and finally returned from tension to calm. There is no treasure land, and no one is handed over to the minister. As Wei Liujia's sentence fell, a total of 12 Yen Xian released the Yenli chain at the same time, binding him. Push into heaven. The sun turned around and looked at him. Wei Liujia's figure was slightly startled, confused, and puzzled. I gave you the best things without reservation. Why should I do this to me? Without waiting for an answer, he was caught and sent to heaven. Liujia, don't blame me. My power has been weakened to the extreme. If I don't want to do anything, I will always be in a passive situation. Among the clouds transformed from Yanli, there are Sendais. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing have already searched dozens of Sendais, and none of them have found any trace of silver bells. For a time, even Jian Wushuang began to doubt whether Yinling had left Demitian. Just as he was preparing to search again, more than 10 streamer-like figures passed through the clouds and galloped away into the distance. Why was that kid caught? Di Qing just glanced in that direction and said softly. Jian Wushuang raised her brows. Wei Liujia? Shouldn't he be banned and returned to Degushan? The truth is clear. I'm afraid it's not that simple. The dozen or so Yan Xian just bet him just now. Is it because of the things of Dan Maru? He jumped in his heart and soon decided that the sun was correct because of those who had troubled Wei Liujia. But what made him far from thinking was that the sun's correction would tear his face so quickly. Don't care about those trivial things. Instead of wasting too much energy, it's better to finish things soon and go back early, Di Qing advised. However, Jian Wushuang had his own decision. Wei Liujia was bound this time. If he didn't save, he would definitely die in the hands of the sun. And he has already roughly guessed that the reason why Yu reading books www. Okanshu Kam will catch Wei Liujia is that he suspects that Dan Maru is not from his hand, but someone else. Now the doubt is just doubt. There is still time to control to rescue him within this time. Things start from him, and there must always be a solution. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang tilted his head toward the meaning, and then galloped along the team of Fang Kai. Di Qing also apparently guessed his intention, immediately shook his head helplessly, or followed. Among the dark black clouds, there was a thunder snake thick like a python rolling in it, emitting a terrifying trend. At the same time, one side of the was in it, and it was extremely extreme. In this vast heavenly hell, there are very few guards in charge of supervision, and only 3 top guards patrol. I don't know how long it has passed. A long wind blew into heaven's hell without attracting any attention. Chapter 48:35. Deep in heaven, it was extremely dim. A figure trapped by the Yanli chain hovered in one of the spaces. His thin fairy body was covered with scars at this moment, and the blood of God was dripping from every scar. The long hair was also scattered, covering his face. The sun's companion, the white-robed Yan Xian, was holding a long whip that exudes muddy black. Every 10 breaths, he pulled out a whip and brought up a flesh. Even the fairy bodies shackled by the detached road cannot resist. Speak it out. The original rewards remain the same, and you can still succeed Dadi Angwin. With such a rich blessing, why do you not accept it? Bai Pao Yan Xian exhorted while waving his long whip. The blood of God kept falling, and the tortured figure slowly raised his head, revealing an eye through the scattered hair. Bai Pao Yan Xian jumped suddenly in his heart, and then pumped harder after calming down. There was a ripple in the air, and the sun's correct figure slowly walked out. Speak it out. It will feel better. A dead sneer sounded. I'm so stupid. 5 pills. I didn't leave one. I don't have any ideas to give. But now it ends like this. I gave you the best things without reservation. Why should I do this to me? Wei Liujia roared, and a pair of Mori cold-blooded eyes stared at the young man. Indiscriminate. Bai Pao Yan Xian angered, and the long whip in his palm pulled directly to his cheek, leaving a narrow and long blood stain immediately. The blood poured out, but Wei Liujia didn't make any sound, just staring at him. The young man waved his hand to stop it, and when he was about to speak, the whole heavenly hell suddenly trembles, and then the powerful and extremely vigorous strength was agitated. His Royal Highness, heaven's hell has changed. Bai Pao Yan Xian's complexion changed dramatically. As his words fell, a fierce explosion of martyrdom broke apart. The whole space was also shaken, and the invisible enchantment seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure, and then burst. All kinds of fierce and extreme force flooded in. With all kinds of unknown and terrifying dynamism flooding, an ugly Yan Xian with 3 heads appeared. It was excited and seemed to have been trapped for a long time. Today, it just wants to devour all living things in front of it. It roared with excitement, but the 3 pairs of eyes only saw a few figures, and then burst. Gong's Izing didn't even look at it. He reached out and squeezed its fairy source directly, smashing its fairy body. But this is just the beginning. At the next moment, an arm with a width of more than 10 feet was like a python, suddenly torn the space, and smashed it with unspeakable force. Yu Xianxian was a little slower, and was blasted out on the spot. The young man corrected his face, and fought with him on the spot. Heavenly prison is breaking, countless trapped here. I do not know how many years of Yan Xian have been released, and began to destroy to the maximum extent. Damn something! The sun shook his anger, and a river of blood appeared in the palm of his outstretched hand, directly smashing the arm that was more than 10 feet wide. "Follow me to investigate," he said, then disappeared with a group of Yanxian. The celestial turmoil increased, and shortly after the sun corrected, 2 figures wrapped in black robes appeared quietly. "Wei Liujia, follow us," the leading black robe whispered, reaching directly to destroy the Yenlian chain around him. Wei Liujia, who was about to faint, died, raised his head reluctantly, and after seeing who was coming, he was startled. "Sir, don't talk, let us leave here," Jian Wushuang whispered. An unspeakable emotion came to mind, and Wei Liujia focused on it. But then he found that after suffering the death penalty, he had no strength in the meridian, and it was difficult to do the simplest action, let alone run. "Sir, let's go. Am not worth saving," he said. Seeing the reason, Jian Wushuang directly reached out and released several Yanli Wamangs to pull him, and then ran straight out of the prison. This chaos that became a pot of kanji was actually done by Jian Wushuang. He and I Ching directly destroyed most of the heavens and released those bound Yanxian, which caused chaos. And the fact is indeed, as he thought, the sun's correction has been disengaged. There is no danger. He glanced at Wei Liujia like a blood man behind him. Jian Wushuang sighed. This guy actually didn't confess a word about him to his son at the last moment. His heart was firm, and he was worth saving. But just as Jian Wushuang traveled through this chaotic and broken heavenly hell, there was a big crisis in my heart. At the next moment, a chaotic burst of chaos, dispelling the extremely dark mans, came from the storm. Its speed is so fast that it cannot be imagined. However, at this dangerous time, Wei Liujia behind Jian Wushuang suddenly burst without warning and directly greeted the big Mang. It's just that with his fairy body, just for a moment he was passed through the body, and the big man's cast was shot at Jian Wushuang. But it was precisely the moment Wei Liujia blocked that gave Jian Wushuang a chance. He turned around instantaneously, crushed down with one finger, and the Tianmen Jiyu, who had not shown for a long time, exploded again with a huge amount of potential energy. When the two collided, the shock wave instantly cleared all chaos. A type of Tianmen Ji offset that big man's. Jian Wushuang did not stay back and pulled back Wei Liujia's broken and immortal body, and the figure of the younger son's correction appeared. He shot a fine mane and a pair of British eyes, staring straight at Jian Wushuang. He had a feeling that the middle-aged, unshaven man had a breath of familiarity. Jian Wushuang did not intend to clash with his son, so after he held Wei Liujia, he wanted to escape. But the dozens of Yanxian that appeared subsequently blocked their way. I Ching frowned, and he waved his hand directly. An indescribable force directly smashed the 2 Yanxian in front of him into a meatloaf. Yu reading books, www.okanshu. "Come, go," he said in a deep voice, taking advantage of this empty talk, and reached out to shoot 2 of them directly. Yan Xian fell in the hands of Di Qing, and even resistance could not be achieved, but he was killed in 6 moments. Jian Wushuang nodded, and did not hesitate, directly carrying Wei Liujia to take the lead. The The sun, who hovered in the void, was completely shocked by the scene just now. The Xian is covered with a wave of hand. What kind of strength is it to be so freehand? Is it Dian immortal? There was a touch of Sun Han in the heart of Gong Zijing, and at the same time, there was a fierce color in his eyes. Even if it's Dian immortal, don't want to run wild in my big sky. At the same time that the entire sky was completely destroyed, the sun's body shape was still standing in the distance. A palm-sized white jade object appeared in the palm of his hand. Chapter 48:36. The white jade object looks like a round mirror. The whole body is white in teeth and is densely covered with complex fine lines, which looks strangely ancient. With the appearance of this round, mirror-like object, the prisoners who had screamed in the heavens were all silent at this moment, and then fled like crazy. The young man corrected his face coldly, reaching for a mirror without any expression. Immediately, the breath of the surrounding void suddenly dropped to the freezing point, and a wicked evil that escaped from the cold escaped from the mirror. Immediately afterwards, there was a burst of silver bell-like laughter, and then the white mirror of the tooth suddenly reflected the head of a red-eyed baby boy. "Your Highness, long time no see." The young man tilted his eyes and looked at the weird baby in his hand mirror, then threw the mirror directly into the air. The stagnation of the void, like a quagmire, left all the prisoners who wanted to escape trapped in place, including Jian Wushuang and Di Qing. All felt a sense of unsteadiness. A ray of red light shone through hundreds of millions of miles, shining through a mirror hanging high in the air, making everything seem to be soaked in the sea of blood, strange and unspeakable. Sword Wushuang, carrying Wei Liujia, frowned slightly, and then looked at the side of Qing Qing quickly. "You took him away from this place. I will take care of it, and then meet at Daga Mountain." Di Qing glanced at him again and said with a lip, "Or do you take him away first? I won't be relieved when you break." Jian Wushuang did not quit anymore. After a 9-turn big, Yanxian was in charge. How could it be more reliable than a Yanxian? Watching him move away, Di Qing withdrew his gaze and frowned slightly at the mirror that exuded a strange blood. "Pretend to be a ghost." He disdained, and waved a wave of strength directly. By Mangian pierced the blood void, but when he was about to pierce the mirror, he didn't see any trace of it like a mud bowl entering the sea. Then a tender white arm like a lotus root suddenly came out of the mirror. With the emergence of this arm, a red-eyed and red-haired infant's head appeared. The baby was full of fangs and made a weird smile. The mirror hovering in the void is like a space, constantly exposing a body. And the Qing, who had never cared about it, frowned even more after seeing this scene, not because of tension, but disgust. I saw that the red-haired baby, who had been drilled out of the mirror, could no longer be described as weird. His predecessor was a pocket-sized baby boy with a dark red apron stretched around his waist, which looked normal. However, behind his head, there are hundreds of identical heads, hanging like the same bunch of grapes behind him. From a distance, it looks like a body with a centipede. Very disgusting. Rao has seen the storms of all things and has experienced the truth of many wars, but he can't help but frown. It's so disgusting. What can grow like this? Surely not spliced. After releasing these ugly babies, the sun directly withdrew the mirror in the sky, and his figure was far away. At this moment, above the ruins of this heavenly prison, only Qing Qing and the ugly infant boy were in 2 forms. Jia. Food, powerful food. The countless heads behind the ugly babies were all staring at Qing Qing at this instant, and the saliva dripped unabashedly. "I advise you to get away. Don't dirty your eyes," Di said coldly. "Otherwise, I will make you die." Ugly babies heard the words as if they heard jokes, and all opened their mouths together. "Who do you think you are? You can kill me? Even if you killed me once, I still have 99 lives. What can you do to me?" Di Qing didn't speak and pointed out directly in front of him. A touch of extreme strength, like the same arrow shot out, instantaneously shattered the head that was still laughing. Absolute strength is here. Even if you have 10,000 lives, this seat is still correct. Taking a head from behind and putting it on the neck, the ugly baby was completely angry. Food. You it. At the end of the sentence, his lotus-like arms shuddered suddenly. The blood space with infinite pressure suddenly fell again, and even the void was crushed. But Ching just disdainfully smiled. He lifted his palm and gave a direct shock. The blood space that was about to come down burst from the middle, which stirred up a rain. The ugly baby didn't wait without a hit. He screamed, and the hundreds of heads behind him, like grapes and centipedes, opened their mouths at the same time and spit out slap-sized blood-red bubbles. Obviously, Ching didn't want to get entangled in this way anymore. Golden light began to flow in his eyes, and his palm had already condensed a full blow. When the tens of thousands of blood-red bubbles came, he released them with one blow, but a weird scene appeared. The unstoppable blow by Di Qing didn't destroy the bubbles, but instead made the bubbles absorb on it and swallowed it crazy. Hee, it's delicious. The ugly baby boy's figure also skyrocketed at a rate visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the heads behind him also changed the shape of the queue into a long snake shape, whirling around. Due to the previous warning of Jian Wushuang, he cannot use any highly recognizable fairy style in Demission, so Di Qing cannot release his golden and black treasures, and can only use the endless vigor of Yuan to fight. Right now, this ugly baby is just the peak of Yanxian, but it gives Di Qing a tricky feeling. The ordinary fairy style has no effect on him at all, and will be swallowed. Even if I Ching instantly shattered more than 10 heads, the ugly baby was not affected at all. Instead, he seems to be in a passive situation. Every head is madly eating away the diffusive forces scattered outside the body and constantly growing itself. This makes Di Qing very uncomfortable. Just when he was ready to release the treasure phase to crush directly regardless of it, a sword with a sharp edge to the extreme was cut. A total of more than 20 heads were directly chopped up completely, making Di Qing feel all light. Immediately afterwards, a mysterious figure surrounded by a large black robe came out into the air, holding an invisible sword in his hand. When Di Qing saw it, he raised his eyebrows. "Don't you go to send that guy back to Daga Mountain? Why did you come back so quickly?" The bearded sword Wushuang shrugged. "I met an acquaintance halfway through. I threw him to the acquaintance and hurried over." Noble nodded, and with Jian Wushuang as a companion, he felt inexplicably calm. This big guy doesn't look like a single individual. It seems to be forcibly stuck together. Very powerful. Jian Wushuang stepped forward and analyzed. "It doesn't matter what he is. It's finished," Di Qingsheng said in a deep voice. Chapter 48:37. Facing the ugly infant who almost occupied the half of the void, there was no fear in the eyes of the two figures. The blood that was so thick that it could hardly be turned out spit out from the hundreds of heads of the ugly baby. Moreover, Jian Wushuang and Di Qing have been surrounded, hundreds of heads squeezed from each other. In the middle of this blood, he smelled a little unsteady. After a disaster in the Sand Devil's Cave, the sword that is already burdened with cause and effect, and the killing robbery, the perception of blood and murder has reached an unprecedented level. He felt that the blood of this ugly infant was very strange and complicated. It could never be a single individual possessed, but was forcibly piled together. Converging his mind, Jian Wushuang burst out 3,000 sword intentions all over his body and wiped out more than half of his blood. Di Qing also moved. Without using Baoxiang, he stretched out his hand and smashed dozens of closed heads easily. With the cooperation of the two of them, almost a dozen of breaths, they slaughtered over 100 heads of ugly infants and children together with their bodies. But without waiting for Jian Wushuang to close his hand, the broken blood sky, those residues suddenly gathered together again and formed the appearance of an ugly infant. He laughed excitedly. Jia, I have 100 lives. How did you kill it? The harder you are, the deeper you will fall into this blood, and finally you will not be obedient to become my nourishment. The thing, Qing whispered in a low voice, and then took a step forward, suddenly shaking his arms. Suddenly thousands of golden feathers emerged, and each one shot down with a big momentum. The blood void was punctured, and there were shocking cracks. The ugly baby boy smiled, looked at the advent of Jinyu, and hurriedly manipulated the grape-like head behind him to resist. But he apparently underestimated the meaning of Diqing and overestimated himself. The golden feather, with a ruinous breath, burned the blood void and directly nailed it into a sieve. Another death. But this is a permanent cure. But it really didn't happen for a moment. The ugly baby boy's figure appeared again, and he roared angrily. After this brief confrontation, Jian Wushuang apparently did not intend to fight anymore. It would be quite tricky if he had to kill nearly 100 times, as he said. This leaves the sun with time to correct, and can do many things. At that time, if they want to escape again, I am afraid it will be very difficult. After all, to be able to send 5 masters of Yen and 2 masters of Yen to the assassinator, who assassinated Master Mo in the north of Tianxiansu, will never stop here. After glancing at He Diqing, Jian Wushuang took the lead to leave. Diqing also made a move with both hands, directly condensing a golden enchantment, so as to block the eroded blood, and then flew away. The ugly infant boy screamed in anger, but he did not dare to step forward, only to manipulate the rich blood to erode the void. Just when Jian Wushuang felt that he had escaped from danger, the void became steep red again. The bone mirror reappeared again, and as the rich red unfell to the extreme, dozens of figures were scrambled out of the mirror. When the white bones in the ragged robes were old, the halberd fingers screamed, and a huge amount of dynamism rushed out of the bag around his waist. Another Yen Xian roared with 2 heads, holding 2 great hammers in his hand, and threw the giant hammer in his hand in the face of Jian Wushuang. 10 weird and ugly Yen Xian walked out of the mirror and blocked their way together. Sword without a double-face color side, lifted his palm and held it in the air. Suddenly the flying giant hammer came to a stop in the void, and then shattered. We're afraid we can't walk away now, he said with a deep voice. 11 bodies surrounded him. These Yenxian from the bone mirror are far more tricky and powerful than ordinary Yenxian. Various spells emerge endlessly, and it is very possible to master the fairy style. Because there was a fight with the sun in the previous heaven, the sword Wushuang, at this moment, needs to hide the iconic fairy style as much as possible. Although the figure of Gongzi's correction is unknown at this moment, Jian Wushuang can feel him hiding in a dark place and may appear at any time. The 11 Yenxian, who looked strange and ugly and exuded eccentric energy, rushed towards him without any stay. Jian Wushuang no longer hesitated. The long sword in his palm exuded the momentum, startled with infinite sword. Zingahujianjianya, Bloom, fatty Yenxian, who looks like a butcher at the forefront, first ran into it and was directly swallowed by the sword of the Xinghe Lake. The remaining old bones, old lanterns, and other Yenxian did not have time to dodge, and were all involved. As Jian Wushuang's strongest swordsmanship, his strongest swordsmanship is revealed at this moment. Even if these Yenxian have strange, but after all did not jump out of Yangxian's scope. Under Dayanxian, the sword is unparalleled. This thick sword like Tianhe made the Qing aside, and this guy who was just the peak of Yenxian brought him an inexplicable threat. When the sword's intention dissipated, all 11 eccentric and ugly Yensian disappeared, and even a little dross remained. Under the broken void, it finally slowly condensed the shape of an ugly baby boy. Except for him, the rest of the Yensian all died. But within a short period of time, he even lost his life, and he dared not step forward. Jian Wushuang apparently didn't want to engage in this meaningless and hidden fight, and left Qingqing quickly. The void is broken. The heavens are completely collapsed. Everything is shrouded in the tumultuous blood. Everything, including the sight, is twisted. There was a ripple in the void, and then the younger son walked out of it, and the bone mirror suspended in the sky fell back into his hand. Seeing the ugly baby, he stepped back subconsciously and looked at him in horror. "Big master." "Incompetent waste," the son said softly, carrying his hands on his shoulders. "Is it all arranged?" Going back to adults, blood must have blinded their eyes and made them confused. The ugly infant grinned. The young man gave him a look. "It's a good job. When the matter is over, you can choose a few more fairy bones to nourish." "Thank you, Lord." He grinned, revealing his eyes in disguise. After a few breaths of time, he escaped from the covered by blood. Jian Wushuang and Di Qing both breathed out. Without Yensian keeping up, the gloomy sense of oppression disappeared, and the son's correction did not keep up. "Leave here first, then make plans later." Jian Wushuang made the decision. Gong Zizing has discovered their existence, and the entire Dimitri will be in martial law for the next period of time. I am afraid that it will be more difficult to find the silver bell with the sky-shaped bone armor. Chapter 48:38. I don't know if it was an illusion or the discomfort after the battle. Jian Wushuang felt that the sky in front of him seemed to be covered with a faint layer of red yarn and even slightly distorted his sight. This is not a good sign. He stopped staying and took Tianqing directly away from the heavenly prison plane, away from the heavenly palace, and went to Daga Mountain for a short break. But in the next moment, Jian Wushuang was shocked by everything in his eyes. I saw that all the heavenly plains were broken, all the fairy mountains collapsed, and the Tianhe, suspended in the clouds like a silver ribbon, was also cut off. The sky dome is extremely dark, lowering the endless flames, burning all visible objects, and entering the sky is no longer half intact. The vast expanse of sky, composed of more than 20 heavens, 17 fairy mountains, and 6 blessed lands, is irreparably destroyed. It took a while for Jian Wushuang to recover, looking at the destruction of the scene under the eyes, still a little unbelievable. He whispered softly, "Who has such energy and can cause such a degree of damage to Domitian in such a short time?" But Di Qing showed a meaningful expression. It seems that none of the people under Zhenliang are waiting for leisure. Domitian suddenly suffered such a degree of damage. Jian Wushuang began to be calm in her heart. Yinling will definitely leave Domitian again, and then it is almost impossible to find her again. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang hurried to the direction of Daga Mountain. With the blessings of Yinyan Shan, it was only a few breaths before returning to the Gushan. But the Dago Mountain at this moment has already been destroyed. The entire fairy mountain was cut off to the middle position, and countless lotus flowers were also burned by the sky fire. And from that small hole in the sky, spitting thick black ink. Jian Wushuang's dark path was not good, and his figure came to the broken hole in a flash. I saw that in the dark sky there was a giant man with gold belt and armor, which was several feet tall. Even Qingqing appeared thin in front of him. The giant man was smoky, with black smoke all over his body, showing the strength of Yensian Peak, sitting deep in the sky like a hill, and the entire day of the cave was filled with clicks, and the sound of chewing appeared strange. Perhaps the stranger was aware of it, and the giant man slowly turned his head, a huge wild boar head reflected in Jian Wushuang's eyes. The giant man actually had a wild boar head, and there were 2 fierce long teeth in his beak A delicate thigh was hung on the left tooth, and a head with round eyes was pierced on the right tooth. And beside him, all the broken wreckage. Shi Qingqi's head is gone, Wei Lujia's head is strung on his long teeth, and Zhao Ting's head has been eaten by most of it. None of them survived. Looking at the terrifying corpse on the ground, Jian Wushuang was irritated. He directly condensed an invisible long sword and cut it towards the giant. The giant man sitting cross-legged on the ground was not afraid at all, even with a bit of surprise. "Nine, brother, you will be back so soon." A strange scene happened. Jian Wushuang's sword spirit even crossed him, slashed to the side wall, and completely shattered the winter. Throwing away the half-eaten Zhao Ting's head, the giant man got up quickly and hurried towards Jian Wushuang. "Nine, brother, why did you come back so quickly? Did the task that big brother handed you complete?" Jian Wushuang retreated a few steps, his long sword pointed straight at him, and said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Why did you kill them?" "Nine, brother, you are confused. I am your third brother." The giant man with a wild boar's head scratched his head and said, "Kill them? It's just a group of small miscellaneous deities. Our purpose is far more than that. Here, the eldest brother. They have gone to the city and looted the ground. Presumably, it will not take long, and here will be our 9 brothers." Jian Wushuang heard the words, frowned, and was a little uncertain for a while. Was this guy having a problem with his brain, calling a stranger to Jiodi? "Do you know me?" he tentatively asked. "You are my 9th brother, of course I know." Juan said, "Is the task assigned to you by your elder brother completed?" At this point, Jian Wushuang was still a little puzzled, but he continued quietly and said, "All the things that have been completed have been completed." "That's good. Now let's go to the big brother," and they meet together. After the words, the giant man put the pig's teeth on the thigh of the cleaning pool, and the head of Wei Liujia into the mouth, chewing and outward. "Go." Jian Wushuang turned his head to look at it, and had always been close to him. He had nowhere to go, and he was the only one left. Looking at the wreckage, he sighed and buried everything with his hand. Stepping on the broken sky, the ruined scene is still going on, with the sky fire of destruction burning all the souls. Everything is so unreal, but weird. The creatures in each side of the heavens wailed, and then annihilated, and the dark air covered everything. The tycoon in charge of chewing, slurping again and again, confused, said, "9 brothers, what are we doing here? Isn't it to create our own world? Look here, it will be ours soon." The sword has no two-sided color and no fluctuation. He began to feel something is wrong. All the diffusive forces around the body fluctuated and showed a unique gray-white color. All of this is like some kind of illusion or dream. "What are you, stupid? 9 brothers. Let's build a world of our own here and continue to expand on this basis," Juan said happily. Jian Wushuang suddenly felt a bit dizzy, and the surrounding pictures were beating, and it changed from gray and white to a rainbow of colors, and everything was constantly magnifying and beating. "Sir, why are you here? It really makes Liujia easy to find." Suddenly, Wei Lujia's chewed head suddenly came out of the giant's beak and looked at Jian Wushuang with a weird smile. Immediately afterwards, Shi Qingqi's head and Zhao Ting's head came out together, shouting to him scramblingly, "Admiral, help! Adult, help!" Jian Wushuang's head became more and more painful, and he could not even think about the simplest. The giant man stretched out his palms and pressed those heads back into his mouth again, with a concerned expression. "9 brothers, are you okay? From the moment you came back, I can see that you are a bit wrong. Everything is so strange. Everything is so absurd. Don't come close to me," Jian Wushuang whispered. He endured the growing pain in his mind. But then the grotesque picture suddenly changed. Chapter 48:39. The Broken Sky Dome and the destroyed great sky disappeared, replaced by a vast palace. The bursting pain in Jian Wushuang's mind suddenly disappeared, and everything became clear. But the only thing that hasn't changed is the giant man with a wild boar head still standing beside him. This time, besides this pig-headed giant, Jian Wushuang was also standing with 7 figures, all of whom were ugly and distorted, bloated or strong. A total of 8 figures, each holding a tray covered in red cloth. 9, brother, you have made great achievements in this battle against the sky. Just wait for the big brother's reward. The giant man with the wild boar head touched Wushuang Wusho and whispered. Jian Wushuang didn't pay attention to him, but looked at the tray that was out of nowhere when he didn't know when. The tray was covered with red cloth, and there was a fist-sized protrusion in the middle, and it was beating slightly. He stretched out his hand and tried to lift it, but was interrupted by a thick voice. Come in. As this remark fell, it seemed that there was an irresistible force in Mingming that pushed Jian Wushuang forward. He frowned, but realized that he could not resist, and he could only let that force push forward. Xinbu stepped into the giant hall, and the scene before him made Jian Wushuang's brow furrowed. This is an evil palace. The entire vast hall is concave in the middle, and there are countless corpses stacked in it, and there are no fewer than 100,000 broken and clean corpses. On top of these corpses, there is a huge mountain-like figure which has no face, and it can hardly be described by creatures, just like the silhouettes formed by various creatures being squeezed together. Have seen Big Brother? The remaining 7 figures shouted in unison, and at the same time stretched out the tray in their respective hands. The mountain-like figure did not respond, and was still silent, as if waiting for something. The giant man who was closest to Jian Wushuang looked around for a while, and then reached up and opened the red cloth on the tray in his hand. Brother, please enjoy. This Yenxian taste is different from what we have eaten. The red cloth was lifted, and a closed head was revealed. Jian Wushuang was horrified, and I saw the head, but it was the head of the Qing who disappeared. He looked again at the tray in his hand, and reached out to slowly lift the red cloth over it. A bright heart is beating faintly. It is the source of the fairy. No, how could he die inexplicably? This must be an illusion. Jian Wushuang thought to himself. At this time, the mountain body sitting on the countless gods moved. He waved a long distance, directly ingested the head of Di Qing, stuffed it into his mouth, and chewed. The space seemed to be still. The mountain body stopped moving. After a while, he raised his arms and rolled up the body of the Qing in the remaining trays one by one. But when it was Jian Wushuang's turn, he suddenly grasped the essence of Qing in his palm before he was swept away. 9, brother, what are you doing? This is dedicated to the boss. Juan said anxiously, and he had to reach out to take the fairy source in his hand. Jian Wushuang smiled coldly, his figure straight backed a few feet, and said coldly, when will it be installed? Should this illusion be broken? Should I destroy it? Several giants were all stunned. What are you talking about, Brother 9? What illusion? I'm your 3rd brother. The giant man with a wild boar's head looked worried and surprised. At this moment, the space suddenly oscillated, and the dome of the palace shattered. Hundreds of thousands of strands of Chinese shine through the broken gap, and a large golden scale claw appears, covering the top of Jian Wushuang's head. Sword Wushuang saw it, and took a breath, and his figure followed the golden scale claws. But at this time, the huge mountain body moved. He suddenly waved his arm and smashed it, surpassing the power of Yenxian burst. He was shocked that if the strike was in the middle, it would definitely be hit hard. The imaginary scene did not appear. The golden scale claws completely wrapped the sword Wushuang and blocked the blow. The whole palace instantly shattered, and even with all the pictures began to collapse. 9 brothers! When Jian Wushuang opened his eyes again, the familiar scene appeared. Heavenly prison has completely fallen, and the void is enveloped by a kind of blood gauze, and he is still standing on the spot and has just made a gesture of escape. Di Qing was beside him, looking at him with raised eyebrows. Jian Wushuang swallowed the throat subconsciously. I thought I had a dream just now. Wen Qingwen then explained slowly, strictly speaking, that is not a dream, not even a fantasy. What kind of place was that just now? He was puzzled. Di Qingqing slowly raised the corner of his mouth. If I tell you that is a possible situation in the future. Jian Wushuang was stunned, and was somewhat stunned. That is to say, what I just experienced is not false, but real, and it may happen. It can be said, but it's not correct. It's a bit complicated, including I can't fully explore it. Di Qing said, but there is one thing I can be sure, that everything I just experienced is based on fantasy, is a world that should not have appeared but was created and is about to move towards reality. Jian Wushuang frowned, and Di Qing said it was very complicated and contained a considerable amount of information, which was equivalent to explaining the psychedelic scene just now from the source. But he didn't believe it anyway. The scene of Feng Kai would be possible in the future. Actually, we were confused from the beginning. Di said quietly, the blood energy has a psychedelic effect. I am afraid that if you are ordinary Yenxian, you can't escape. But he obviously underestimated us, would leave such a gap so carelessly. He said, waved his hand, and directly cleared the blood of his body. Hundreds of babies and children emerged quietly, and they kept retreating. As he appeared, there was another ripple in the void, and the gentleman in a long gown slowly walked out, slowly. It's really amazing. It seems that all those who can come to visit me as a guest are first-class players. The younger man wondered if there was something wrong, and caused the dissatisfaction of the 2 people before he came to Domitian as a guest. Jian Wushuang did not want to confront him, lowering his voice and saying, we just passed by here, had no intention of enemies, and left after a while. The son corrected the news and slightly raised the corner of his mouth. Oh, is it just passing by? Presumably, the pill in the hands of Liujia, the master of Xianshan Mountain, has nothing to do with the 2, and the destruction of Heavenly Prison has nothing to do with the 2. Jian Wushuang no longer spoke. The palm of his hand had condensed the sword in tension, and waited for the young man to correct the difficulty. He immediately started. Chapter 4840. However, Gong Zizing didn't seem to have a plan, but looked at Jian Wushuang with interest. Then he slowly reached out his palm. 50 pills, I will let you go. Jian Wushuang's eyes are slightly condensed. 50 dependent pills are not worth mentioning to him. Even if he is 500, he can get them. After all, Chuanxiu is already full in the Nawa, nearly 1,000 pills of different efficacy. 50 Damaru swords can be thrown by Wushuang naturally, but he does not intend to hand over any of them. Judging by the prince's mentality, once he surrenders, he will never let them go, but will set himself on fire. So Jian Wushuang is ready to fight. I don't know what Damaru is, and I can't give it to you. Gong Zizing would obviously expect this kind of answer. His tone was not in a hurry. It seemed to be fixed. My big celestial body is already heavily guarded. Outsiders want to enter almost impossible things. I want to come to you. It should have come from Bai Shanyu. Now, Bai Shanyu has also been blocked. I'm afraid your retreat is gone. As he spoke, a ray of strong and violent light glanced from the Sifang sky dome, surrounding Jian Wushuang and Di Qing Tuan. Jian Wushuang just swept away, and then guessed that there were nearly 100 Yenxian, and his face looked dignified for a while. Nearly 100 Yenxian I am afraid that it is all the power under the sun's correction. It is an unimaginable force of terror. Even if he realized the immortal sword Wushuang, he could not compete with such a force. However, with the help of the Qing dynasty, he thinks that it is still possible to withdraw from the whole body unless there is a big Yanxian under the sun. It seems that in order to confirm Jian Wushuang's conjecture, the two whole bodies were wrapped in large black robes, and there was no sly body shape with half of the strength and energy overflowing. His gaze narrowed, and the two mysterious figures were exactly the same as those of the two Dayan immortals who had met with Qing Qing in Baishengxianzu. See you again, two great Yanxian. Two visitors. If you insist on leaving and leave nothing, I am afraid you will not be able to bear the consequences. Young Master shrugged slightly. His eyes suddenly became sharper, and at the same time a dark and extreme sword condensed from his palm. A total of nearly 100 Yanxian, surrounded by two great Yanxian, is unimaginable. This is the first time that Jian Wushuang came to Dayanhuan to face the tyranny. It also made him know how terrible the details of the sun's correction were. Then the voice of Di Qing passed into his consciousness. And fight and retreat, everything has me to understanding. A burst of tremendous strength suddenly burst out. The black robe fluttering between the dances, Jian Wushuang Gao Qing's arms, and a magnificent heavenly gate breaking through the chaotic sky dome, just like the same glorious daylight. The Tianmen slowly opened, and a giant finger fell from it. All Yanxian was stunned, and he was frowned with his son. He didn't expect it anyway. At this moment, they both dare to take the lead? Well, I really don't know how to write dead words. He sneered, pointing his black sword in his hand. Cut off my limbs and capture them alive. All Yanxian moved, but not forward, but to avoid the blow that landed on the sky dome. Xuanjia Tianmen is an ancestor technique. As Jian Wushuang's sentiment becomes deeper, the excavation of this ancestor technique has also reached the top. Although the ancestor technique is still useful, the face of Yanxian has already shown fatigue. If the user is not Jian Shuangshuang, the effect will be greatly reduced, a type of power realm. Let the four immortals who attempted to fight against each other directly burst the immortal source and die. There were a few heavy hits, and the encirclement circle had some disturbances. Di Qing immediately broke up, and he directly confronted the two black-robed Dayan immortals. His palms seemed to be flattened, but contained a full blow of Zhou Zhuan Dayan immortals. Seeing these two black-robed Dayanxian, they also tried to resist. In an instant, billions of strands of Huameng burst out of the confrontation, and the unparalleled martyrdom swept up directly. Di Qing was still standing still, but the two Dayan immortals stepped back at the same time, and their eyes under the black robe showed incredible eyes. All the palms under the black robe tremble uncontrollably. The prince, who was originally watching the game, was shocked when he saw that scene. The power of one blow made both Dayanxian lose. Who is he? Di Qing's face was disdainful. The two areas are just guys of Dayan Immortal trying to resist him? Leave it all. I haven't beheaded Dayan Immortal for a while. He loosened his muscles and looked forward. The war broke out. With one sword out, the sword Wushuang was like a ghost, and his figure was simply neat. He held an invisible long sword, and, as if entering a land of no one, even facing the siege of nearly 50 Yanxian, he was not afraid. Both shoulders are bound together, and one sword pushes millions. He is proud. With the blessings of immortal immortality, even if he is seriously traumatized, he can recover in a very short time. One thing about his fairy body, Jian Wushuang never said to the outside world, that is, he has no fairy source. The so-called immortal source, similar to Dantian, is the foundation of all bodies, and the road of practice is condensed after the cultivation of the position of immortality. It is extremely important. But Jian Wushuang does not have the so-called fairy source, and the immortal fairy transformed by super-perfect life form has nothing in it. This has both advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that he has nothing important to defend in particular, and the disadvantage is due to the lack of immortal sources. He is extremely insensitive to Dianhuan's avenues and can only be explored slowly. One sword smashed a fairy source. Jian Wushuang covered it with another palm and expanded the encircling circle by a few points. So far, Yu is reading www.ukanshu.com. This encircling circle composed of nearly 100 yenxian and 2 dianxian has a tendency to collapse. The sun pressed his sword handle tightly, frowning to the extreme. He didn't even think that these 2 uninvited guests would have such terrible strength. What are they? Thing. Is it sent to kill me? The young man corrected his heart, and suddenly thought of the young son Emo who had died in the northern celestial state. After he thought of this level of association, he became more calm. The 2 big yenxian, who were originally regarded as the bottom card, were forced to retreat at this moment, and it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. Since it's here to kill me, then be prepared to bear the consequences. Gongzi Jiao's eyes grew colder. Under this war, the void could not bear to start to collapse, and the initial crowd of yenxian, after experiencing panic, also tacitly agreed to start a joint counterattack. Chapter 48-41. In this way, Jian Wushuang's decline was revealed. The joint force of dozens of yenxian was terrible after all. The murderous intent of the water swept over and over, making him tired of coping, and his physical strength reached a slight critical point. While dealing with the 2 great yenxian, Diqing also endured nearly half of the yenxian attacks, which was also a bit difficult. Young master gave him a deep look and then said in a deep voice, "You all go to Changfu Mountain." At the end of the sentence, his body shape disappeared into the vast void soon. After hearing this sentence, Jian Wushuang felt inexplicably wrong, but he could not escape. A total of dozens of yenxian tried to hold him down as much as he could, and Diqing was also blocked by the 2 Dian immortals, and his body was trapped. In this way, the 2 of them were deliberately carried forward. The broken void shattered as they moved forward. Changfu Mountain, consecutive heavens and earth, are the oldest existence of the entire dimension. They existed before the concept of dimension. Infinite ink-colored clouds and smoke are surging slowly around Changfu Mountain, which is very impressive. The first sun who rushed here was relieved, obviously, and then the corner of his mouth slowly rose. The secret hidden under Changfu Mountain, except for his own knowledge, no one yenxian knew. Here is his ultimate hole card. Being carried around, Jian Wushuang also realized that it was wrong, but he couldn't break away at all, and could only move forward with Diqing. The 2 Dian immortals also fell directly under Diqing's terrible offensive. The remaining 3-turn Dian immortal, at the final juncture, also destroyed his arm at the cost of completely destroying the foundation of immortal origin. Dianxian all fell, threats disappeared. Facing the situation of less than 70 yenxian, Diqing carried out a devastating slaughter. With yenxian's demise, this side of the road is in disorder. Jian Wushuang was also shocked to see this scene. The strength displayed by Diqing was too large. I am afraid that he could subdue him, and only that palm that destroyed the entire northern celestial state Yubo. Although both of them were inevitably brought to Changfu Mountain, none of the nearly Baiyan immortals holding them survived. When the last yenxian fell under Jian Wushuang's sword, the broken void left nothing but the remains of the fairy corpse. Waving his hand away from the blood on his hand, Jian Wushuang slowly spit out a breath. Killing nearly 30 yenxian is also a big consumption for him. But he did not relax his mind, because there is a unique breath in the heavens. The entire vast sky presents a unique water-white color, just like a splashing ink landscape painting full of unpredictable, unique beauty. Especially in the dark white flowing clouds, there is a Tsangshan, the vast Tsangshan. Di Qing's brows frowned slightly. Where is this place? Why do I have a familiar feeling? Isn't it the old guys who haven't died yet? Jian Wushuang heard the words and looked at him. The old guys who are not dead, aren't they like you? Are they all in the same era as Shenhuiyang? Of course, but I want to come. Except for those who can't escape the world, I am afraid that I can participate in the war and be able to survive. Di Qing said, with the conversation between the two of them, the sun's correction of the previously disappeared figure emerged quietly again. At this time, his eyes were full of Morin's murderous intention and anger. As his last heritage, the demise of nearly 100 yen-xian and 2 daien-xian was an irreparable major loss, which caused him to burn out all his years of accumulation. Looking at both Jian Wushuang and Di Qing, he is already moved to kill. The crimes you have committed are not enough to repay 10,000 deaths. The sun shook his anger and said, I want to make you suffer so much. As the voice fell, the Changfu mountain, which fell between the ink-colored clouds, suddenly shuddered. Wisps of water-white huamang scattered from the center of the mountain. As if the sun was shining in the sky, all the drifting clouds were dispersed, revealing the dark and ancient mountains, along with Hua Mang's reflection, an atmosphere that transcended the times and transcended the ancients, filled every inch of space. This kind of breath is extremely unique, so that viewers have a trance illusion. Di Qing's brows became tighter and tighter, and he smelled familiar. When the hundreds of millions of huamang converged in one place, a figure in a long cloud with a flowing cloud and water patterns slowly emerged. It was an old man who didn't need a clean face, and his face was clear and rugged, like the Tsangshan of Yuanshu Yuezhi. Jian Wushuang gazes at the eyes, and he feels that the old man's breath is far beyond the ordinary Dayan immortal, giving an unknown feeling. After seeing the old man's appearance, I Ching slowly raised his mouth, and then said loudly, Who should I pretend to be a ghost? It turned out to be the first stray dog, under Zhenliang's seat, Changfu. Such terrifying shouts resounded throughout the heavens and the entire Changfu mountain. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and apparently heard many connotations from his words. It seems that Di Qing and Changfu have known each other for a long time, and they seem to have complained. And the younger son was stunned to hear the scolding, and then turned to look at the old man. The old man who was called as Changfu seemed to regard the screams as a fart, but he didn't care. He looked at the son and corrected it, then said slowly, I didn't say that. Don't you wake up to this seat before you survive, or die? The son knows, but the elders support the elders. And now the whole day is at the time of life and death, the son said with a painful tone. My last details are all slaughtered by them. If I don't invite you out again, I am afraid that even am about to lose warranty. The old man heard that did not speak anymore, and looked slightly muddled towards the clear meaning not far away. Take you away and return. This era is not ours anymore. I have no intention of fighting a meaningless fight with you again. The son corrected the news and frowned. Elders help the elders. They can't just let them go. Otherwise, my dead servants can't die in vain. Di Qing smiled coldly. Changfu, where did your momentum go from now on? How did it become the look of the old hungry old man now? It seems that the old dog with a broken back is not affected by the owner. Jian Wushuang secretly said badly, and once this extremely ironic word came out, I am afraid that everything would be hard to stop. Sure enough, the face of the elder, who had never looked good, was changed. The long suit on his body began to flutter, and a kind of Wangus old breath burst out. Now that His Highness has orders, Then Changfu finally walked into this one. He said this calmly, with the determination of their time, slowly moving forward. Chapter 48-42. Di Qing also condensed the color of sarcasm. A pair of golden eyes dignified. The reason why he just said the most ridiculous words is, after all, because of things that were entangled and unresolved in their time. Chang Fu, who belongs to Zhenliang, is very strong, and even strong enough to be able to leave a great reputation in that chaotic era. Although he is strong, Di Qing is also not afraid. Unlike the old appearance that Chang Fu now shows around him, his breath is strong and powerful, like a blaze that is always burning, so that people can't look directly. After the years of baptism and adherence to the essence of the present, it is Zhou Zhuan Dian Xian. Changfu is also Jiuzhu Dian Xian. The battlefield is rallying. Jian Wushuang's gaze also locked the young sun correction. He didn't want to fight this battle, but now that the matter was over, he couldn't withdraw. Holding a black sword, the young man straightened and pointed at the sword. Their battlefield was also opened up. At this point, the earth-shaking battle started in Changfu Mountain. A sword came out, and the sword intended to cut off even the void came. Jian Wushuang held out in his food, and then dispelled Jian Yi. The young man's body shape followed, and an indescribable scarlet scroll surrounded him. That was his fairy style. As early as in the battle for the peach in the heavenly realm, Jian Wushuang would appreciate it. Extremely powerful, if it were not for Jian Wushuang, who finally gained the immortal feeling from the stone beads. It would probably be defeated in his hands. Damn things, don't you anybody want to leave Damien today? The sun whispered coldly as the scarlet scroll spread out. An unnamed swallowing breath quickly eroded his fertility. Because of the inability to use the immortal form, Jian Wushuang was a bit difficult, but was barely able to fight. In the battlefield on the other side, the battle between Qingqing and Changfu is full of the spirit of ruining the world. It seems that the elders who are hungry and old are carrying an overwhelming trend in every blow, and even Qingqing can't get any benefits in his hands. Infinite. A black Wubao appeared together, and also carried Zhengrong to Changfu. The clouds of smoke between heaven and earth are all empty. You are still as sharp as before, no change at all. Yen dissipated. Changfu looked at him and said, Di Qing proudly, why should I change? Who can change me? I don't know how many years have passed. Are you still looking for? Changfu looked at him again. What's with you? Di whispered coldly, your way has long since dissipated, and my way has just begun. Changfu heard the words and smiled. It was a blessing to be able to survive in that era, and my Tao is about to die out, but even so, it can be enough to cause you serious damage. Just with you now, what qualifications do you have to say such a thing? Di Qing said in a cold voice, and the opportunity appeared in his eyes. You don't understand this seat, just as this seat still doesn't understand you, Changfu slowly said. Everything here is my avenue, and it is my foundation. Even if your breath is now in me, how can you destroy me while in control? Di Qing sneered. Then I will destroy your avenue and destroy your foundation. At the end of the speech, he reached out and pushed a total of 3 colors of black, white, and red, and 3 different ancestral treasures emerged, all with a strong momentum rushing towards Nafa Mountain. However, seeing Changfu, there was no hindrance. Let Qingming's natal treasure sect break the entire Changfu Mountain from the middle position. Along with the sound of Hong Zongdala's destruction, Changfu Mountain, which connects the heavens and the earth, breaks from it, the sky dome collapses, and the unknown void material surges. Sure enough, you never knew me at all. Changfu said lightly, the reason why I can survive is far from foreign objects, even myself. As long as I don't want to lose, no one can defeat me completely. Even Zhenliang is no exception. Bullshit. Today you are in my hands is the best home. Di Qing said. Changfu looked at him. Then give it a try. Belonging to Zhou Zhuan Dian, Immortal's vigorous efforts, he directly confronted him for the purpose of beheading. But the offensive could not cause effective damage to it. The seemingly week-long support, like a lonely boat in the wind and rain, was stubborn. The two of them fought in this way, causing the sky to fall and the void to vanish. I have a doubt. Why do you want to fall under Zhenliang's seat? Di Qing asked. Changfu rode. For the sake of the emperor's luck, but then I realized that that kind of thing is really extravagant. You have followed such a long time. Haven't you got even a little insight? No, I can never feel that kind of thing. Yi Qing's eyes showed an unspeakable emotion, but it was quickly covered up. So, what's the point of living alive now? I exhausted my final consciousness just to distinguish the difference between annihilation and endless sleep, but now I have a clear understanding, so you can think that I am living to beg for death. Changfu said, I want a strong man who is qualified to accompany me to die together. After hearing the words, he immediately became vigilant. He felt bad, and the old guy was likely to pull him to die together. It seemed that in order to confirm his thoughts, Changfu's breath suddenly surged. Then an unexpected scene appeared. He collapsed directly, escaped from the attack of Di Qing, and came directly in front of Jian Wushuang. Without any warning, the vastness of the extreme force all poured down. At the same time, Jian Wushuang subconsciously tilted his head to one side. The immortal body can't bear the long strength strike, instantly fragmented and dissipated. The sun was shocked, and his figure quickly backed away, and he felt an unknown heart palpitations. Looking at this scene, Yi Qing couldn't believe it. He couldn't understand why Changfu shot the sword Wushuang without warning. Then he was completely furious. S figure came to Changfu in an instant, and he gave him a full palm. Why do you do this? Because I want to kill all the unknowns that may happen. Changfu's face was more aging. He looked at the meaning of Qing. I traveled through thousands of domains when I was young, and I saw some mysterious warning in one place. That warning is very captivating and weird. It's simply not convincing. But now I believe a little. Speaking of which, Changfu reached out and held his hand to restrain Di Qing. I used my life to do something in the end. He said that the strength of the whole body began to burn rapidly, and the foundation of the fairy source belonging to Zhuzhu Dianxian was also burning. His mother, how can you dare to support the old dog? Di Qing's eyes were splitting, but everything was silent next. The heavens are completely martyrdom under this indescribable light. Chapter 48-43. This martyrdom was too violent, and it was the last thought of Zhou Zhuan Dian, Immortal. It made the entire Changfu Mountain and several heavens easily vanish. 10 celestial fields closer to Changfu Mountain were all affected and instantly turned into scum. The territory is the head of the 7 emperors, sitting in nearly 30 heavens, 17 fairy mountains, and 6 celestial lands, and more than half of them collapsed. Gongzi only felt colic in his heart, and after some unknown years he carefully annexed and controlled the control of the Domitian and the subordinate forces, and it was so destroyed. Suddenly a touch of Yin Hong's blood came out of his mouth, and his eyes swirled around before he was swallowed by the aftermath of Xianyuan's martyrdom. At this point, the vast expanse of heaven, completely into the chaos of death. The martyrdom lasted for 10 days, and hundreds of millions of souls were destroyed, leaving no trace. The broken walls of the broken Tiangong floating in the void, the inexplicable smoke and dust covered all visible objects. The break of the Tianhe River changed the surviving celestial domain of the river channel and caused water disasters. The fierce skyfire also penetrated the void and dragged everything into purgatory. This scene is even more tragic than the northern Tiangxianzu, which has long been destroyed because the territory involved is too vast. These are all caused by a drooping old Jiu, Xuandian immortal. His last thought was exploded. It was too horrible. Everything is dead. Wu, oh. I do not know how long it has been. A lone and ethereal whine echoed in the void. Immediately afterwards, a long beast, a whole body of snow-white and black dense veins broke through the dust, and while heading forward, he bowed his head and sniffed hard. On the back of the beast, Xiongqi looked anxious, and his clothes were all damaged, obviously affected. With her appearance, Zhao Ting's figure also appeared, carrying Wei Liujia, who had not recovered completely from her injuries. Sanqing, please hurry to me. If I can't find the place where the adult is, I will throw you here directly. Sakinki reached out and grabbed the big beast's big ear. Hurriedly, Sanqing pleased again and again, and his eyes were crescent-shaped. Zhao Ting's eyes were dignified. She looked at the heavenly ruins. Her expression gradually dimmed. Everything prosperous seems to come to an end. Wei Liujia dragged the wounded fairy body and eagerly searched. He wanted to find the adult who had great grace for him. Give up under the impact of this power. They will never survive. Zhao Ting sadly. Leave it all. Everything is irreversible. Shi Qingqi glanced at her and did not speak, but urged Sanqing to continue his investigation. Wei Liujia coughed. Zhao Tianwan, no matter what, let's find it again. I believe adults will be lucky. With a slight sigh, Zhao Ting continued to explore. Sanqing has a keen sense of smell and rushes in the broken void with the cleaning pond, and soon comes to a smoky place. It twirled in place and turned to look at her, pleased. Shi Qingqi moved in his heart, hurriedly standing in the void, gazing at the smoky place in front of his eyes, and then slowly stretched out his slender palm. At the next moment, a broken, blood-covered arm suddenly broke through the smoke and caught her palm. Shi Qingqi froze in place, his body trembled fiercely, and he even forgot to scream. The smoke slowly dissipated, and a heroic and pale cheek appeared. At the moment, his fairy body shattered and nearly fell, but his eyes were still open. He couldn't hold it until he saw that the person before him was washing the pond. After closing his eyes, he fainted again. Suppressing the throbbing heartbeat, washing the pool, and stepping back, patted Sanqing. Sanqing felt that although he was a little reluctant, he still held his head high and placed the truth on his back. He's all right, then the adult will be all right. Shi Qingqi comforted himself and continued to search. However, Zhao Ting is not optimistic. She can feel that Jian Wushuang is nothing more than a fairyland. Although the strong ones are too much, they will never survive this martyrdom. In the hazy ghost, he felt that his figure was falling endlessly. Everything was away from him. Everything that has gone through seems to have changed into the past. Could I be dead? No, it's impossible. I'm dead for immortality. How can I die? At least now, I can't die. What the heart says, the fairy body becomes. In the broken void, covered with smoke and dust, tiny stars rose from the void and reunited continuously, forming a magnificent scene. There are hundreds of millions of stars, like fireflies connected to each other, and constantly go to where they should go. If you look closely, you can see that in the magnificent stars, sitting quietly in a robe, the figure of long hair flying, and more solid. This fantastic and magnificent scene naturally attracted the attention of Shi Qingqi and others in the first place. Sir, it's great. Shi Qingqi was surprised and then excited. Wei Liujia also saw this scene, looking overjoyed, and hurried forward. The hair fell lightly. An array of pure golden revealed from the eyes that gradually condensed. The dissipated memories gathered together again, and Jian Wushuang absorbed the first force. His reshaped fairy body showed a magnificent dark blue, as if gathered by stars. A galaxy composed of 7 bright stars surged in Jian Wushuang's eyebrows. Are you alive to death? Interesting. He slightly raised the corner of his mouth, his eyes helpless. Adult, it's so good that you are still alive. Shi-Ching-Chi came first, might be too excited, and there was a slight red flush on the sides of her cheeks. Jian Wushuang smiled and shook his head. Although the immortal body was transformed into an immortal body transformed from a super-perfect life form to avoid the end of complete silence, this time the situation was different. He was completely destroyed. Chang Fu's blow didn't leave his hands completely crushed into powder, which was the heaviest blow to Jian Wushuang's arrival in this great Yen Huan. He can be sure that if it is not immortality, just under that blow, even if it does not die, it will spend endless years in the void, and there is a possibility of awakening. At the same time, Jian Wushuang was also puzzled. He couldn't understand that Chang Fuhui suddenly broke up without warning and killed him. Isn't it true that Qing is the biggest threat? Now that Chang Fu has completely disappeared, I am afraid he will never know about this problem. Looking at San Qing, lying on Sanking's back with a weak breath, Jian Wushuang breathed out. Di Qing really didn't die, but looking at the look of him now, I was afraid that another life was removed. Chapter 48-44. Wei Liujia also stepped forward, faced with Jian Wushuang. He was a little embarrassed. Sir. Just alive. He smiled. At this time, Zhao Ting also stepped forward. Domitian has been damaged for more than half. I am afraid that it is not suitable to stay here anymore. Let's retreat quickly. Jian Wushuang was a little surprised in his heart, but he looked at Tianhe River's broken stream and the broken heavens burned by the sky fire. He also understood that Zhao Ting's words were true, and Domitian was indeed destroyed by nearly half. But he didn't want to leave here. He knew that once he left, the silver bell carrying a zigzag bone armor would probably never get news again. While Jian Wushuang was hesitant, a huge amount of vigorous force suddenly rose around him. During the smoke and dust, the young man holding the black real sword appeared. At the moment, he is also the end of a strong crossbow, and his whole body is bloodied. Destroy me and want to leave alive. Let me die. At the end of his words, the black sword in his hand was madly cut forward, a unique and extremely extreme sword meaning, so that the surrounding void was broken, and even strangling Jian Wushuang. Only after condensing the immortal body but the sword Wushuang for half a day, and even unable to release the diffractive force completely freely, he withstood more than half of the impact. Zikinki and Wei Liujia even passed out, and the only Zhao Ting, who had some background, was also difficult to resist this blow. With the collapse of the void, Jian Wushuang and others all fell into endless darkness. After releasing the blow completely, the sun sighed heavily and gasped, and at the end of the crossbow, he had no power to pursue it. After a moment, his figure also disappeared. As the sun left, the void that was originally dead and collapsing appeared again, and even wearing a large black robe could not hide his good posture. If Jian Wushuang is still there, it will certainly be recognized at a glance. This good posture is the silver bell that has not appeared for a long time. She stayed in place for a while, and eventually her figure disappeared. Oh, it's terrible. The big guys are coming to see it. Is it dead in the water? Wow la la. The sound of a clear stream flowing in the ears rang in my ears, and everything was calm again. I don't know how long it took, and the slight itch on the nose made Jian Wushuang barely open his eyes. A ray of sunlight illuminates everything. Then a pink cheek with baby fat came into his eyes. Yeah, you're awake. I thought you'd have to sleep all the time. The pink cheeks opened with a pair of big, smart eyes, and said with a smile. Jian Wushuang strongly supported his aching body, and after looking around the environment for a week, He looked at her again. "Little girl, where is this place?" "Of course it's my house. How can it not be beautiful?" The little girl's big and flexible eyes were crescent-shaped, and she seemed to be waiting for praise. This wooden house made entirely of ordinary wood seems to have been around for a long time. Apart from being extremely clean and tidy, there is nothing particularly outstanding. But Jian Wushuang nodded and smiled. "It's very beautiful, very similar to the house I used to live in." The little girl sniffed her eyebrows proudly. "Hey, this is all done by my brother. He is very powerful." Somehow, looking at the little girl underneath, inexplicably reminded him of the original childishness, and then he unconsciously reached out his palm and wanted to knead her bun. At this moment, a rough voice with tension sounded. "What are you doing, Shichen? Hurry up!" A young man wearing a coarse linen shirt stood outside the door and looked at him nervously. Jian Wushuang consciously withdrew his hand and smiled guiltily. The little girl seemed extremely dissatisfied and turned her head. He finally woke up, and of course I was taking care of him. Taking a deep look at Jian Wushuang, the young man hurriedly hugged her around. "You wake up, hurry, and go." The young man looked at him and whispered, "I can't leave too many people here." Knowing its meaning, Jian Wushuang nodded. "Okay, I will leave now." The little girl stopped immediately. She pushed the young man hard. "Li Dachuan, you are the one who did this. This is the task assigned to us by the village. Let us take care of him. Now he is not fully recovered. If you want to catch others, are you not afraid of people in the village poking your backbone?" The young man, named Li Dachuan, also hesitated when he heard the words, Am he already awake? And our task is not even completed. It's far from finished. You see, his injury hasn't recovered. Listen to me. Just leave him." The little girl assured her by patting her chest. Looking at the quirky little girl in front of him, Jian Wushuang smiled. "I still don't disturb you. I have recovered almost, and I will leave immediately." After he finished speaking, he looked around and found that he didn't wash the body of the pond and others, and dare to ask, "Have you seen any other people with me?" "Have seen it." The young man nodded and said plainly, "In addition to you, there are 2 men and 2 women, plus a big dog. All of us were fished out of the river and distributed to every household to take care of." Jian Wushuang heard the words and got out of bed to salute him. "Thank you for your help." The young man waved his hand. "You don't have to thank me. I will save it if someone else falls in the river. My brother is a stupid big guy. He can't understand any good words. Just tell me." The little girl said with a smile. Jian Wushuang couldn't help crying and laughing. "Okay, I'll talk to you." She was satisfied and then pretended to be old-fashioned. "You have been in a coma for more than half a year. Now that you are awake, I should lead you to find your friends in the village." Before he could speak, the young man preemptively said, "Let me take you. You reading books www.okanshu. Come, they are not far away." Jian Wushuang did not refrain, and again said, "Then there is work. The immediate urgency is to find them as soon as possible, and then leave here. I want to go with you too." "No, you can stay at home honestly for me. Dare to run around carefully. I will come back and beat you." Walking out of the wooden house, facing the sunlight at noon, Jian Wushuang gradually relaxed. This is a medium-sized village inhabited by the river, but there are more than 100 households. There are fishing nets in front of each household, and many dried fish are hung in the air, which is peaceful. The young man named Li Dachuan walked in front of Jian Wushuang, acting as a guide. From time to time, he turned his head to look at Jian Wushuang. His cautious gaze was curious, and he seemed to want to say something, but he was afraid to speak out of some kind of fear. Chapter 48-45. Jian Wushuang looked at his suffocation with a bit of luck, and couldn't help but smile a little. "What questions do you want to ask me?" "May I ask, are you angry?" "Of course not angry. After being affirmed, Li Dachuan seemed unable to hold back anymore and asked directly, "Are you a fairy? Are you as powerful as the elders in Qingting Mountain?" Jian Wushuang was a little shocked, and then he couldn't laugh or cry. "It's a fairy, but it's just a mediocre fairy." "I knew you were immortals." Li Dachuan was extremely excited after getting affirmative answers. "We were fishing in the river at that time, and it went dark in the sky, and accompanied by lightning and thunder, it can scare individuals. We wouldn't dare to show up in the boat. We didn't dare to come out until the sky was restored, and then we saw you floating in the water. The good guy was breathing fairy." Li Dachuan talked eloquently, but he saw that Jian Wushuang had not spoken all the time, and then he stammered nervously, "It's okay. I haven't spoken to other people in a long time. I feel pretty good." Jian Wushuang smiled. Li Dachuan nodded quickly, and he said, "I'm sorry. I didn't want to drive you away. I was originally worried that you are bad guys, and it will be bad for us, but now it seems that you are all good guys." He looked at Li Dachuan and smiled. "Why do I feel like a good person again?" "Because you don't have any racks at all. It's more peaceful than the fairies in Qingting Mountain here. It must be a good person." Li Dachuan scratched his head and said that his opinion is very simple, so it is so simple to judge that several of Jian Wushuang are good people. Jian Wushuang smiled and did not speak. After his feelings, the strength of the Fangtian domain was very sparse. "I am afraid that it is impossible to offer an ancestral top repair. Therefore, those fairy elders in Qingting Mountain in Li Dachuan's mouth are probably not even the top repairs, just some ordinary monks. The villagers in our village, our ancestors lived on the Weishui River for generations. All of them were drafters and harvested by the sky. Although I have no great skills, I can still fill my stomach. If you still need a place to stay for a while, continue to live with us." During the speech, Li Dachuan and Jian Wushuang knocked on the door of the first villager. Zhao Ting had just woke up and was relieved after seeing the coming person as Jian Wushuang. After a simple conversation, Jian Wushuang took Zhao Ting to the next place. Washing the pond, Liujia and the two did not suffer much impact at the last minute, and naturally recovered the fastest. But the truth is clear, but has been in a deep sleep. In line with Jian Wushuang's idea, the power of Chang Fu's last thought really required a true life of Di Qing, which made him unable to wake up. Since Di Qing could not wake up, the time of natural departure will be delayed, and they will have to stay in this village for some time. In order not to trouble Li Dachuan and other villagers, Jian Wushuang directly opened a hole in the village not far away, and they temporarily repaired it. After a few months, it passed by again. During this period, Li Dachuan and other villagers delivered fish soup and other fish products on time to ensure that they were not hungry, although they did not know that the fairy had no longer needed food. Zhao Ting is naturally interested in the lack of absorption of the heavenly plane, which cannot be absorbed even by absorption. He just hopes to leave quickly. But the essence cleared the breath more smoothly, showing no signs of waking up. Time continued to fly by, and after Jian Wushuang said that they did not need food, the villagers rarely came to deliver food. But only Li Dachuan, Li Dachuan's sister, came back tirelessly in 3 or 4 days. Outside the sky, Jian Wushuang waved his hands and formed a flying bird the size of a finger, giving it to Li Shichen. "It's so beautiful. You have become more tricky than the wood my brother made." The little girl said with a smile and holding Fei Bird, "Can you show me every day?" Jian Wushuang looked at the endless Weishui River and said, "I'm afraid I can't. I will leave soon." "It's so fast. Can you leave?" "No, I still have a lot to do." Li Shichen bulged his mouth. "Can you teach me? Then I will find you and change it for you when I have learned it." Listening to the naive words of this day, Jian Wushuang shook his head. When he just wanted to explain patiently, he found that Li Shichen's eyebrows had a subtle reaction. He moved his heart and pressed his fingers to her eyebrows. After a brief exploration, Jian Wushuang smiled. Since you want to learn so much, then I will teach you. At the end of the conversation, a ray of quiet and pure energy escaped from his palm and soon fell into Li Shichen's eyebrows. Nothing has changed, but everything has changed. I am afraid that it is difficult to cultivate a top cultivation in this plane of heaven with lack of dynamism. But what makes people fool is that in such a direction, there is another genius with excellent qualifications, born with immortal capital, has a very sensitive response to Yan Li. Such a genius is Li Shichen, sitting next to Jian Wushuang. When she didn't realize it, Jian Wushuang quietly opened her fairy money and gave her another fairy root. Even if he does everything in the face of this heavenly plane, the situation of lack of strength is in vain, but it is enough to use it as a trick. In Jian Wushuang's view, Li Shichen just wanted to have the ability to change the trick of flying birds. He gave it to her, nothing more. After the sun and the moon circulate, Kanshu www. Kam stayed awake for another year before he awakened. His immortal body is strong, but the interest is a bit weak. Obviously, he has not fully recovered, but it is enough. It's time they left. You really want to go, don't you stay longer? Li Dachuan asked. Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled. No, it has been here for several years. It is time to leave. In addition, the cave that I left behind, you and your descendants, in the event of war or natural disasters, can hide inside and will not be discovered by the outside world. After explaining this remark, he patted Li Shichen's little head in the front. Remember to practice hard. Maybe I will come back to check later. Li Shichen nodded heavily. Well, rest assured, I won't carry it. Except for Li Shichen, everyone present knew that these mysterious fairy people would never come here again. Chapter 48-46. At the end of leaving the plane of the heavenly domain, Jian Wushuang shot a few times to improve some of the rules of the avenue, so that Yanli was derived at a slow speed and developed towards a good situation. Leaving the heavens and traveling through the void, Jian Wushuang already knew that this is not the domain of Demission, and he even left far away. Zhao Ting, who knows the plane distribution of the sky most, is responsible for leading the way. With her guidance, several of Jian Wushuang avoided the chaos like headless flies. Now, Demission, where she is, has been destroyed for most of the time, and together with the sun, Jiao are chasing her. She has nowhere to go, only to follow Jian Wushuang's side. The same is true of Liujia. From the moment he was imprisoned in heaven, he has died of heart, and since then he is no longer the owner of Daga Mountain, just the Sanxian Liujia. As for the cleaning of the pool, her mission is over. After this series of life and death adventures, fortunately there is no injury, and Jian Wushuang will naturally send her back. Perhaps he saw his intentions, and Zikinki became sullen all the way. In the space shuttle that has lasted for several years, too many unpredictable situations have occurred, and the main thing is not completed. He didn't even see Yinling's figure. Even though Jian Wushuang was so unwilling, he had to leave in a sad mood. Such a drastic change in Demission can't stay for a long time, and the heavenly court of Zhenliang will certainly be aware that they can only leave. On the way home, the Shiqing Pond sitting on Sanking's back was in a daze, as if thinking about something. In the end, she seemed to have made up her mind and jumped from Sanking's back. She came to Jian Wushuang and said anxiously, "Master, can I not go back? I still want to follow you." Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head directly. "No, it's not my intention to bring you out. Now that things are gone, there is no reason not to let you go back. But I still have things to do. I still want to find my mother." Shiqing Qi whispered to her, "No, let's go back." there are countless outside worlds. Every place is unknown and full of unpredictable dangers. There is a reason why your father won't let you out. Jian Wushuang's voice is full of doubt. Shi Qingkai's gaze dimmed. She dared not refute and could only return to Sanking's back. He took another look at Sanqing, which has changed so much now. He didn't know what it would be like after so much blood gas was consumed in Bai Shanyu, but from the moment it seems to be very stable, with no side effects. Only the sound of gang wind roaring in the void. For security reasons, the fairy arrays that can be transmitted between the heavens are no longer used, and they shuttle through the void at a constant speed. Despite taking a lot of detours during this period, he finally found Qingyu. Jian Wushuang personally sent her back to Qingzhou and back to Zongmen. Outside the smoky mountain gate, Zikinki suddenly found the courage to hold him, and then quickly released his palm. "Can we see you again?" "If there is no accident, you should never see it again." Jian Wushuang turned around and smiled slightly. "This is not a bad thing. You continue to be a young lady in the sect, continue to practice diligently. Your father's behavior is very good. You can try to let him teach you some insights." Speaking of which, he seemed to remember something, and then took more than 10 dependent pills from his arms and stuffed them into her hands. "You will eat one of these pills every time you reach the bottleneck in the future, which will have a chemical effect. At the same time, you should also remember that these pills should not be exposed, and do not let any monks know, even your father can't tell. Once they are exposed, it will be a disaster for you and the entire sect. Remember every sentence I get, and obey it." Jian Wushuang's eyes were a little dignified. Never a joke. Holding tightly the pill in her hand, she cleaned Qi Zhengsheng's head, and she said softly, "Relax. I know you are good for me. I won't be disobedient." Jian Wushuang nodded, then drifted away. A black robe broke through the clouds of smoke, and soon disappeared like a shooting star. Zikinki quickly stepped forward 2 steps, but soon she stood on the spot again. If she was lost, her eyes were filled with tears. Sanqing stepped forward and rubbed her palm with her furry head. For a long time, she was ashamed. "Sanqing, do you say that we will never see each other again?" Sanqing raised his head and murmured, not knowing what he was expressing. The dense lines around him were flowing slowly. After sending the Shi Qingpa back, he glanced back at this peaceful heavenly field. Jian Wushuang said softly, "Let's go back to the 6 heavenly fields." Di Qing came together in a timely manner, as if his face had recovered from a serious illness. With an imperceptible smile, "Wushuang, I think you have been alone so far. Why don't you want to put that little girl as a fairy? Although she has not yet reached Yanxian, but it is indeed a good seedling." Jian Wushuang heard the words, shook his head helplessly, and said such a sentence. "Overlooking at the galaxy, the sea, and the red moon, I have already found the star, and I have no longer nostalgia for everything." After he finished speaking, his figure would go ahead. "It's really an unpredictable and infatuated guy," Di Qing murmured slightly before moving on. Zhao Ting looked at his figure. A complex flashed deep in his eyes. A group of 4 people, after more than a few months, then finally returned to the 6-day realm. Stepping into this jurisdiction, which belonged to the Emperor of the Emperor Xiaozi, Zhao Ting seemed a little worried. She was afraid that the Emperor would recognize her. After all, she was a heavenly official under the seat of the Emperor and had great power. It was Liujia, who had never seen the world before. Gaze looking around the sky's void revealed novelty. The first time Jian Wushuang set foot in the realm of 6 days, his brows frowned slightly. He saw that he was still under martial law, passing the heavens where Yanxian capital is very rare. At this moment, either riding a fairy crane or Yanxian traveling in 3 or 5 years, no fewer than hundreds of people are on the way. It seems that all are converging in a place. Did the sixth heaven realm have been released? He wondered. But soon Jian Wushuang stopped thinking about these things and took Di Qing and others directly into Xiaogu Tian. Ziyagushan is as calm and deserted as ever, but the strength is sufficient to the extreme, and it is an excellent dojo for Wu's practice. However, Ling Jianwushuang was surprised that none of Chen Qing, Chuanxiu, and Cui Jing were in the hall, and even their respective strengths were weak in the hall, which seemed to have been away for some time. Guessing that they might have been found by the little emperor, Jian Wushuang entered the temple and rested. Chapter 48-47. After sitting in the hall, following the words of Jian Wushuang, Liujia quickly realized that he had taken care of himself. He should remove the wounds in the fairy body in the shortest possible time to avoid leaving cracks. Instead, Zhao Ting looked quite uncomfortable and looked awkward. Seeing her uncomfortableness, Jian Wushuang said quickly, "If you are not accustomed to staying here, you can leave at any time. I will not block it." Zhao Ting heard the words and shook his head. "I don't mean that. I have nowhere to go now. If it wasn't you who helped me to save me, I'm afraid I'm already dead. Are you worried that Ziyagushan will discover your identity?" Jian Wushuang asked. She nodded. "A few years ago, as a heavenly official, I once went to heaven with the sun to go to the feast and met with all the emperors. Now I want to think that it is very likely that the sun will recognize me. It's a bit troublesome. I'm afraid you can only continue to transform and change your face." She sighed. "It can only be like this." Just as they were talking, 3 streamers crossed the clouds and rushed into the silent hall, leading a Yenxian with a sturdy body like a towering divine peak, with a tough face at the moment. "Brother Sword, I didn't think you would come back so soon. It seems that you haven't even been there for 10 years. Then there were 2 bodies, one was elegant, and the face was handsome and soft. Although the other figure is quite handsome and elegant, the decayed posture is extremely mixed. 3 figures, 3 Yenxian. They arched their hands at the same time, their eyes showing excitement. "Brother Sword, Brother Sword, Brother Sword." Jian Wushuang also left the seat long ago and smiled. "I want to congratulate you two, and each has changed a lot." The 3 of them looked at each other and then laughed. Chun Qingmei flirted and said, "You don't know Sword Brother. He too take Danwan as sugar jelly all day long, and it is a strange thing not to break through to Yenxian. Brother Chen, you're also embarrassed to say, who nearly choked over 60 bite pills at once." Chuanxiu quipped. Cui Jing also received the voice at the right time. "If Brother Chun and I helped me, I'm afraid you will be successful." Chun Qing's face turned red. "Hugh wants to fart. I was just in a hurry to control the quality." The original quiet hall, with these 3 living treasures, was suddenly more lively. After chatting with each other for a while, Chun Qing first noticed that in addition to the meaning of Qing, there were 2 figures sitting in the hall. "These 2 are?" Chun Qing asked. Jian Wushuang said. "They were brought back from demission and lived in this little lonely place for the time being." After getting up from the Wu sit, Liujia hurriedly arched his hands. "In the next is the Isan Jiesan. The name is Liujia." Zhao Ting didn't speak, but just sat at the same place and nodded. Chun Qing, Chuanxiu, and Cui Jing all smiled, and they naturally heard that Demi Tian was the sun's site. Later, when Chun Qing was preparing to pull Jian Wushuang to remind him, a Yen Xian came out of the air and entered the palace. "Master Sword, Ziyagushan asked you and the other 6 subjects to go to the banquet today to catch the wind and dust for you. Please take a break and go to Digushan." After speaking, Na Yenxian retreated on his own. Jian Wushuang's brows were slightly frowned. Obviously, after he entered the 6-day realm, the little emperor already knew it, and he even knew how to bring a few people back. Be prepared. Let's go to the banquet together after a short break. Can I not go? Zhao Ting asked. If you don't want to cause doubt, it's best to go with you. Along with the rising of the fairy cloud, headed by Jian Wushuang, a total of 7 figures came to the big lonely heaven, the little emperor's heavenly palace. Master Sword, Zai Odigen has been waiting for a long time. From the side of the hall, the thin purple robe Yen Xian calmly said. Jian Wushuang nodded and took the lead in entering the palace. Brother Jian, I haven't seen you for a long time. The little emperor dressed in extravagant clothing greeted him with a light smile. Please sit down at will. The Tiangong temple is very large, and every Yenxian present at the scene has his own thoughts. Di Qing didn't have a cold for Zai Odigen, so he sat quietly beside Jian Wushuang and closed his eyes to refresh himself. Although Chuanxiu looked calm, the hatred deep in his eyes was strong. Cui Jing converged with a mixed breath and looked nervous. Wei Liujia was also quite nervous and turned his head sideways, intentionally or unintentionally. Zhao Ting, who had turned into a face, seemed quite calm and seemed to be a real guest. Chun Qing is still carefree. Little Emperor, we haven't seen it in some days, and we must not be drunk today. The little emperor sitting on the head smiled. Well, it happened that Brother Jian also returned from demission, and today we will not be drunk. The atmosphere eased, and the plan began to stagger. By Brother Jian, did you find that thing when you returned from Dami Tian? Carrying a wine glass, Zai Odigen came to Jian Wushuang and sat down to ask. He shook his head. I haven't found it. I'm afraid it will be hard to find it in the future. This kind of thing is in a hurry. Maybe you will be able to come to you soon. Maybe. Xiao Dijuan said, drinking all the wine out of the glass. Let's talk. How is Demission's situation? Jian Wushuang looked at him, and he was informed of everything that happened. When he heard that Demitian was almost destroyed, almost all the forces of the sun's correction were destroyed. There was a look of joy in the eyes of the little emperor, but it quickly passed away. This is indeed good news for me. Thank you, Jian Xiong, for telling me. He smiled. We drink together this glass of wine. After drinking the glass of wine again, the little emperor got up, waved his palm, and a real sword fell into his hands. Brother Jian, your swordsmanship is about to be perfected, is only one line away from the sword immortal. How about we talk about it today? He said, and then threw the real sword in his hand to Jian Wushuang. Really? Of course, but I have to ask Brother Jian to show mercy. After a simple conversation, the sword held the true sword without 2 hands and was opposed to the little emperor. The atmosphere in the temple of the entire Tiangong is steep and self-condensed, full of cold swordsmanship. Brother Chen, you have followed the little emperor for the longest time. Guess who will win? Cui Jing looked at Qin Qing beside him and whispered. It's needless to say, the sharp-eyed people saw that the sword brothers won. Qin Qing glanced at him. You know, when we first met the sword brothers, when we discussed kendo, I only walked through the 3 swords in his hands. I'm going. Brother Sword is so powerful. Of course, you learn a little bit. Maybe it's good for you. Chapter 48:48. Di Qing also opened his eyes and looked at it, and then the old was sitting there, closing his eyes and raising his mind. He has never been interested in the results that have been doomed before he even started. A simple argument on the sword will begin in the Tiangong. The little emperor, who does not take the sword as his way, will soon converge on the sword way, and even in the ancestor level, he will be able to fight against the sword immortal. Even Jian Wushuang can immediately defeat him by releasing any form of Xinghe Lake, Jiani, but he didn't do it. This is an innocent and elegant sword. No matter who wins or loses, it's just a matter of rising. Swords are spreading like magnificent flying fish, magnificent. Jian Wushuang holds the real sword, only to resist. But the little emperor didn't know whether it was the rise of alcoholism, or he couldn't help it. The energetic swords slashed down vigorously, and even the diffusing power of the air was cut off. The atmosphere became more subtle, originally a relaxed discussion of the sword, as the little emperor passed by, and the murderous sword intentions raged. All Yenxian present at the scene looked dignified. Chuanxiu had already put his palm on the short dagger at his waist, and he was already light-hearted, waiting for Jian Wushuang to get any trauma he could burst in an instant. Cui Jing saw the breath of change in spring and autumn, but also dignified, and also pressed the black stick around his waist. Di Qing has kept his eyes closed and nourished himself, and seems not to care about everything that happens outside. Zhao Ting's eyes fluctuated slightly, and he seemed to be planning something. Wei Lujia's face was even more anxious. In his view, Jian Wushuang was forced to retreat, apparently not Xiao Ziajin's opponent. But the two-sided color of the sword is quite calm from beginning to end. Even if it is faced with the sword style that emerges from the murder, it is easily resolved. When resisting to 767 swords, the mutation became abrupt. The real sword in Jian Wu's hands without any signs broke into two sections, and Xiao Daijin's powerful sword was also severely cut on his shoulders, smashing its entire peep of bone directly. Chuanxiu and Cui Jing got up directly, but then they were suddenly held by Chen Qing. Don't want to let the sword brothers do something. Don't disturb. The atmosphere was dead, and the little emperor seemed to be sober from the drink, and his eyes were shocked. He unconsciously released the sword handle and touched him. Sword, brother, I didn't mean it. Jian Wushuang stepped back half a step, avoiding his palms, and his complexion remained unchanged. It's okay, when it comes to swords, there will be some injuries. After he finished speaking, he reached out and took the soft sword from the bone of the pipa and threw it to the little emperor. I was so overwhelmed with alcohol that I left first. Jian Wushuang turned and left, and drops of blood dropped from his shoulders and printed on the ground. Originally closed eyes and nourishing the mind, Qing Qing opened her eyes and looked at other people, and directly followed Jian Wushuang. Chuanxiu immediately opened Qin Qing's palm and left quickly. Then Cui Jing also left directly. Zhao Ting and Wei Liujia glanced at the little emperor and left. Soon, Qin Qing and some Yenxian guards were left in this huge palace. Little emperor, Qin Qing got up, and his complexion changed slightly. You are too impulsive. Get off. He looked straight at the door of the hall, where the hole opened. Chun Qingwei sighed, and left without saying much. Heaven is dead. The little emperor's complexion turned from pale to ruddy, and the roots of the palms of his palms clenching the hilt were pale. Damn it! He was furious, and with a real sword, he suddenly chopped the case where Zhenwei was set aside and overturned it. Damn it! Damn it! Are you going to take the seat? The little emperor was completely angry, and his face was almost mad. He wielded his sword and overthrew all the plans, making the entire Tiangong chaos. The thin purple robe has been standing behind him, neither blocking nor speaking. A group of things can't tell who the owner is when this seat is air. This seat is Chu Jun, the future emperor of Desiyu. A louder anger resounded in the temple of heaven. When his voice gradually weakened, the thin purple robe stepped forward in time and handed a white silk cloth. Your Highness is angry. Little Emperor coughed heavily, holding the silk cloth tightly around the corner of his mouth. Sword Wushuang! Sword Wushuang! You. Did you see it? With this one, he didn't even use any swordsmanship. He looked down on me. He didn't even see me from beginning to end. It's not just him alone. Did you see the group of guys he brought back? Did everyone dare to go back to their seats? Especially after I slashed the sword with Wushuang. The group of guys he brought back dare want to do it to me? The thin purple robe has been quietly listening, and at the end he said quietly, His Royal Highness, you forgot, Jian Wushuang is not your subject, but your friend. You should not govern that subject, put it on him. Even if you want to take the seat. The little emperor's voice was slightly angry. Don't dare. I'm just saying what I should say. Jian Wushuang is not your subject, but a friend. Slender Xiao Zi robe finished, looking at him meaningfully. Friend, my son has no brothers. How could there be friends? His voice could not hear any emotions, empty and unknown. I don't know how long after that. Xiao Dijuan turned his head to look at the thin purple robe. Do you know how the real sword in Jian Wu's hands broke? I used my hands and feet to destroy the Jianxin deliberately before. I made this kind of hands and feet deliberately to win him once. Are you ridiculous? The thin purple robe whispered. Your Highness did nothing wrong, but this kind of percussion can only be used between the subjects. The little emperor said again, Is this sword completely cut off the connection between us? Yes, no. I want to make up how to do it. Apologize. In the spacious hall, Yu reads www. Ukanshu. Com has a depressed and dull atmosphere. Jian Wushuang sat in front of a case and closed his eyes to refresh himself, as if nothing had happened. Chuanqiu looked cold, and his palm had never left the hilt in his waist. Di Qing sat next to him in the same posture, with some playful meaning in his eyes. It's not like your style of acting. I've accompanied you along the way and figured out your character, but today this scene still made me unexpected. You didn't touch him. Are you afraid of Zhen Wuyang behind him, or are you treating him as a friend? Jian Wushuang opened his eyes. Zhen Wuyang? I have never been afraid for a moment. As for him as a friend, I never even thought about it. This sword is considered to be something he gave me back. Nodded secretly, a guy who participated in the assassination of the 5 emperors' sons and had a fight with the 2nd emperor's sons. Chapter 48, 49. Thinking of it this way, I am afraid that there is only another result. That is, Jian Wushuang still misses some of the emperor's kindness. But now, he has drawn a line in his heart. Brother Jian, no matter what decision you make in the future, I have nothing to say about Chuanqiu. Chuanqiu said with a murderous intent in his eyes, Brother Sword, I am Cui Jing too. You only need to send a call, and my entire life will be yours. Cui Jing leaned on the pillar, his eyes dignified, and he threw a loud voice. Jian Wushuang heard the words and smiled with his hand. Say what to do so seriously and practice well. Only by constantly improving yourself can we gain a foothold in these countless heavens. Also remember, your life is yours, and it's more important to live a good life. Yes, it's still the Brothers of Swords who understand the truth. Qin Qing raised his thumb, and then digressed, I just remembered that there was one more important thing that I didn't tell Brothers of Sword. He glanced at Chuanqiu and Cui Jing and said, Remember when Brother Sword left the 6th heaven realm? Did our brother say he wanted to open an auction house? It's already open, so I'll wait for you to come back. It was originally prepared to tell you before, but the result was delayed and forgotten, and now I remember it. Qin Qing scratched his head and smiled. It is better to choose a time. Brother Jian, we will open it then. Jian Wushuang did not shirk. Then 1/2 a month later, I think there are already a lot of Yanxian dynasties gathered here. It seems that nothing can hide Brother Jiang. Qin Qing laughed. It's true, we have released a lot of treasures before this, which naturally attracted many Sanxian in the heavenly realm and all Tianzongs. Come here for a while, and wait till the time when we make money. At this time, Di Qing said, You are all Yanxian, and you still care about the so-called currency? Of course I don't care. For our auction house, the transaction with Tianjing is only part of it. The most important thing is the transaction between top-level treasures, which can only be exchanged with the same-level treasures. Chunqing also explained, at this time, even Wei Liujia somewhat understood their intentions. Such an auction house seems to facilitate transactions to draw commissions, but it is not the case. Instead, it exchanges treasure for treasure, which means to include the treasure scattered in the heavens. This chess game is so big that even Wushuang Wushu becomes curious about what kind of behemoth such an auction house will grow into in the future. After going to the banquet, half a month passed by again. In this half-month period, Xiaodaijin sent Yanxian messengers to invite Jian Wushuang to dinner again, but they were directly rejected. After 3 consecutive times, no more messengers came, and Jian Wushuang also fell free, taking a good rest. The half-month's date has come, and when the turbidity alternates, they walked out of the great hall together and out of the little Gudian. A total of 7 figures, like 7 streamers, flew towards the void. From the mouth of spring and autumn, I learned that the auction house was not established in the 6 emperor realms of the Little Emperor. Instead, it directly established a whole sky realm as the foundation, and established a sky realm auction house. The Tianyu plane that built the auction house was exchanged from the jurisdiction of a Tianzong with a condition that people can't refuse. It contains 6 continental plains. It is also very powerful, and it is a land of fuse. And it is such a heavenly plane, but only 1 auction house is built, and the luxury is at the extreme. This is not that spring and autumn are too inflated, but that Tianyu is really cheap. He just used more than 20 dependent pills to set the entire Tianyu plane. Regarding how many treasures of pill they took from the former heaven of the 6 Crow emperors, Chuanxiu counted it before a total of more than 2,400 pieces, and after giving them to more than 1,000 pieces of Jianwushuang, they can still use them. There are more than 1,400. This is an unimaginable number, but it is just the tip of the iceberg of the 6 Crow emperors. This time the Tianyu auction house opened for the first time. It attracted countless Yanxian because Chunqing had used Dependinwen as a gimmick and released some news which caused shock. Stepping on the hazy sky of Fang Xianyun, as a wave of vigorous power circulates across the body, a vast and clean sky is reflected in the eyes. This kind of celestial field is quite good in the big division, and it is a good enlightenment dojo. Thousands of ancestor-level repairers and Yanxian have already gathered in this heavenly domain. They have entered a magnificent heavenly palace one after another, which is quite spectacular. I have a hunch that our auction house will open the market for the first time today, and it will definitely make a name for itself. Chunqing was quite excited. Jian Wushuang, who was at the forefront, smiled slightly. Look at it first. It wasn't until he entered the auction house like Tiangong that Jian Wushuang could not clearly see the 7 characters. Everything is unique. This name is a bit. Brother Sword don't care about the details. This is the name our brother took after discussing it. Isn't it very domineering? Guided by the maid to enter the auction house, Jian Wushuang was slightly surprised. The Heaven Palace, which is almost stacked by various precious jade, is extremely brilliant and is divided into 3 layers with strict order. The Yanxian and Dingxiu sent from the ordinary sect were seated on the first floor, and some hidden sects or Tianzong across several celestial realms were placed on the second floor. As for the third floor, it was only divided into 2 spaces, one of which belonged to Jianwushuang alone, and the other was given to a guest with an extremely distinguished status. As for the so-called distinguished guest, Chunqing did not conceal it was the son of the clan in the Super Tianzong who sold this Fang Tianyu. Jian Wushuang didn't have a cold about it. The reason why he came here was to take a chance and see if he could come across any treasures that didn't come out of the world. With the continuous entry of Yanxian and Dingxiu and the final seating, the atmosphere of the quiet auction house finally warmed up. Sitting on a chair made by Nuanyu, Jian Wushuang was rather uncomfortable overlooking the center of Xiangtian Palace. Qin Qing and 6 others sat in turn on Jian Wushuang's body, all ready to start. The entire auction house's palace was built by the overall planning of the spring and autumn period. For a time, Jian Wushuang also looked at him a bit. With the invitation of Yanxian all gathered, just as the hall gatekeeper closed, there were more than 10 streamer figures directly breaking into the hall, completely ignoring the rest of Yanxian's gaze. Each of these 11 bodies is Yanxian. Like the stars arching the moon, it brings out a body dressed in extravagant clothes. Chapter 48:50. The figure in extravagant clothes with an arrogant look and a lazy standing was more sloppy than Cui Jing. After entering the hall, the 10 Yanxian manipulated the strength and stepped into the air to lift it to the 3rd floor. Such a scene drew uproar. While on the 3rd floor, the figure in extravagant clothes glanced at Jian Wushuang and others with a trace of disdain in his eyes before sitting down. Upon seeing this, Cui Jing suddenly gave a sigh of relief. Yeah, really fucking, if it weren't for this kid, then 15 pills in this domain could be won. Qin Qing also said, "Sooner or later, I will sort out this kid, and I was so troubled that I wouldn't come to Taiwan." Jian Wushuang waved his hand. "Okay, concentrate on the auction. Are you going to carefully select these things that are about to be auctioned?" Chuanxiu nodded. "There are a total of 60 lots, including 20 Dipendamaru, and the rest of the lots are some of the treasures I picked that are not too practical. Release so many Danmaru if some Tianyu sex mines are out of order." Jian Wushuang was worried. Chuanxiu smiled, slightly. "Brother Jian, you can rest assured that I have dealt with it before this, intentionally or unintentionally. We have done some involvement with our auction house and Zyrotigen. Even if other Tianyu ancestors look at it again, they will have to weigh it." "Weigh." Jian Wushuang nodded and stopped talking. He understood what Chuanxiu meant, and it was a fake to be involved with Zyrotigen, but the borrowed name was true for this abruptly built and powerful auction house. It seems that it can only be linked to the Emperor of Zhenliang. With the gradual declining discussion, a woman with a beautiful face and body, both beautiful in face and shape, came to the center of the temple. "The women I have found are all fairy celestial candidates, and their work abilities are first-rate," Qin Qing proudly said. Next, as Qin Qing said, the fairy gave a concise but full-text opening speech, which completely stirred up the atmosphere of the entire auction house. "Masters, today's first lot is called Lu Yunmingdan, and its effect is infinitely useful, so that the owner can deepen the perception and capture of the avenue in a specific heavenly plane. But you must remember this, Dan, the pill is not taken internally, but worn on the body. The initial price of Lianmingdan is 60,000 Montenegro spar. Of course, Tianjing is also available. The initial price is 60 million Tianjing." As the fairy's voice fell, a 6-color rainbow shadow of the pill was hovering in the air. Even if it was through the crystal jade box, it seemed to reveal the fragrance of medicine. Such a so-called Lu Yunmingdan, in Jian Wushuang's eyes, is a chicken rib, but in ordinary Dingxiu or Yanxian, it is an invaluable treasure, and it is not a one-time treasure which can be passed down, and the preciousness has suddenly deepened several grades. Immediately afterwards, the sound of competing for the price was resounded. 60 million Tianjing, 70 million Tianjing, 90 million Tianjing. A louder than ever sounded, and soon raised the price to nearly 500 million Tianjing. Jian Wushuang also noticed some problems. That is, these Songmen Yanxian bidding only used Tianjing, and none of them used Montenegrin crystal bidding. Perhaps seeing the doubts in Jian Wushuang's eyes, Chuanxiu quickly explained. For these Tianzongs, the Black Mountain Spar was originally a spiritual resource, and the pureness of the derivation stored in it was not comparable to that of Tianjing. And Tianjing's mass production is extremely large, and the diffusive power contained in it contains impurities. Almost every heavenly domain is produced. Only Montenegro spars are produced in the next 3 days, so the value between the two cannot be discussed. To put it simply, Montenegro crystal is a spiritual resource. Tianjing can be regarded as an ordinary currency, and it is not a treasure at all, so they will only use Tianjing for bidding. Jian Wushuang nodded and realized it was in this emptiness that the 6 luck destiny finally settled with 3 billion Tianjing. The first piece of Jidan pill is handed over, and the following treasures are presented in sequence. These precious treasures are usually rare when they are seen, but in this ancient auction house, they are pushed onto the countertop very quickly like a horse and a flower, and only need to pay Tianjing. This is a great benefit. For a time, all the Yanxian and Dingxiu in the temple were vigorously bidding, trying to take back a treasure. After learning that all the lots were selected by Chuanqiu and others, Jian Wushuang became interested in the lack of it. But soon, in a somewhat frantic atmosphere, when the lot went to the 20th lot, a fairy came to the 3rd floor and came to Chuanqiu. Senior Chun, only one Yanxian came to visit and presented a treasure to ask us to take it off. And then the commission can be divided into 5 or 5. There is such a good thing. Chun Qing could not help but take the lead. What is the most treasure? The fairy looked up for a moment and said, "It seems to be a jade head. It's not very real." "Yes," after confirming that the lot is correct, "you decide for yourself." Chuanqiu nodded. "Yes, where's that Yanxian now?" "Just below," the fairy said, pointing down with his finger. But there were nearly 1,000 Yanxian and Dingxiu sitting underneath, and they couldn't tell which one. So Chuanqiu just glanced a little at it, and then exposed it. After another Zapindan pill was settled at the price of 6 billion Tianjing, the fairy in charge hosted a round object wrapped in black cloth. The huge auction house suddenly calmed down, and all Yanxian was staring at that item. Apparently, the fairy was also told to take this thing temporarily. After a moment of stun, he said, "This thing is also a treasure, but it doesn't seem to have been told about its effectiveness. It should be one. Very good treasure." Having said that, she simply reached out and lifted the black cloth on the round object. Immediately, a jade head with closed eyes and medium and long hair appeared in the eyes of every Yanxian. This is a head carved by some kind of Wenyu. In addition to being vivid, I am afraid that even the shadow of the most precious treasure will not be touched. This object is a special lot in this field. Only Montenegro spar can be used for bidding. The starting price is 60,000 Montenegro spar. The vast palace fell into an inexplicable death, and a moment later the soft boos sounded, all Yanxian boos. For this successive auction of treasures, the sudden appearance of such a useless jade head is simply a rat shit which has broken the appetite of Yanxian and Dingxiu. Even Yanxian sent by Zongmen began to wonder whether the next lot had high value as always.